OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Right, you're very welcome along this Thursday morning. It is OTB AM. Myself and Owen Sheahan with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. If you'd like to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can always leave a comment in the YouTube channel. Owen, how are you?
Very well, Ger. How are you?
You're a little bit better than Trent Alexander-Arnold this morning.
I am, absolutely. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold has woken up this morning and probably realising that his Euros dream is under severe threat. It's one of those that this close to a championships, if you get injured in the manner in which you got injured, which is kind of pulling up on your own away from a challenge, it's definitely not a contact injury. You know you're going to be out for a period of time that's going to put you right up against it to actually play in this year's tournament. After all the furore, after keeping it a secret that he had been in the England squad for the 3 weeks, as Southgate had put it the other day, all of a sudden it could all be crumbling down around him. And Phil was making the point before we came into the studio today that he actually wasn't very good last night. At the same time, you can't say that it's not going to be a loss for England, given the way that they play. There would have been a place for him in the big games this summer. Yeah,
and he could have improved into the tournament and got a bit of form. Who knows? You kind of want strength and depth, particularly because his flexibility with somebody like Trent that might not be there with some of the other players. Certainly whoever comes next into the squad won't be somebody who you'd be thinking, okay, this is a potential starter in my team, given that they didn't make the original 26-man squad. So that wasn't good from their perspective. Some other interesting stuff happening around the world of football last night that has caught people's attention. Most notably the fact that the Dutch aren't very good.
No, they aren't. I'm stuck between two stools here. I'm not sure whether or not I want to believe that they're going to be good, or whether or not they actually are good. I think it's probably more the former. I think we all want to believe that this Netherlands team can actually be good, but I think they've appointed the wrong man in charge of that team. As we said in our cheat sheet last week, Jose Mourinho once described De Boer as the worst manager in the history of the Premier League. We've had Damien Delaney on the show in the past talking about De Boer as well, and maybe how he wouldn't have been the best man for Crystal Palace at that particular time. The oral history of Frank De Boer's football career in this part of the world hasn't been amazing so far. Maybe when in his first season at Atlanta he did something special. Maybe at Ajax he was an unbelievably special manager as well. But it seems that the evidence on recent form really with the Netherlands is that this team is not going to contend for the Euros. And it goes deeper than Virgil van Dijk being injured, I think it's fair to say. Like a couple of years ago under Koeman, we said Euro 2020 contender immediately. It's amazing how they managed to get from not qualifying to being a contender for this thing. And their manager is way worse now, and their best centre-back is out.
Do you think Virgil decided not to rush back for any particular reason? Like, it's a big tournament.
Yeah, that's...
They don't qualify for tournaments all the time. You know, I mean, obviously, he expects that they will qualify next time around, but it's no guarantee.
No, it's... I wonder could there have been more of an encouragement in a more compelling fashion coming from the top tier of Dutch football towards Virgil van Dijk that might have worked. Like maybe if it's Klopp, De Boer, who am I going to pick? You're going to pick Klopp, and it's not even close at this moment. So maybe there's a bit of that going on. There are a couple of green shoots here and there, like Memphis Depay is just in astonishing form. He's been so good all season and scored a couple of goals last night. Wijnaldum has always looked good in this Netherlands team. Just has way more license to attack, gets into the box a lot more for this Dutch team than he does or did for Liverpool. And going forward, they'll probably be okay. It's just that defence which seems to be the problem at the moment, despite the fact that there is an argument to be made that it's actually a better centre-back partnership than the one they had at the 2014 World Cup, where they went all the way to the semi-final. And the fact that their midfield is kind of young and trending in the right direction. On paper, they should be a country that you've got no worries about whatsoever, that should be semi-finalists at this year's Euros, but you just suspect that when they come up against Turkey in the knockout stages of this Euros, that's going to be not even an upset at this point. The amount of people who are backing Turkey to be the dark horses and the amount of people who are backing the Netherlands to fall flat in their face, I think that's an upset that could happen. But maybe the upset will happen before then. I think that fixture is actually predicated on Netherlands topping their group.
They drew 2-0 with Scotland last night, and that's a Scottish team that I think could just create a little bit of havoc in the tournaments. If they get on a little bit of a run, there's enough good players in that team for you to think, this could be interesting. Some stuff could happen. Anything else from around the grounds last night?
Germany were playing last night. Looked pretty good. I mean, there's kind of like a strange situation here where we kind of look at that German result against Spain last year, which we'll get into later on in our cheat sheet, and say, are Germany a little bit screwed? They drew an all with Denmark last night, getting a few of their top stars back, and they go into this group of death next week against Portugal and against France. And
it's next week. It is next week. The Euros are starting next week.
Yeah, and like for a lot of people, Germany would be kind of the outsiders going into that. Now, like drawing 1-1 with Denmark isn't exactly a result that's going to send shockwaves through that group, but there is always a sense that, are we automatically writing Germany off into third place in this group, which is always a dangerous position to be in. The big winners from last night, I think, are France. Really, they beat Wales 3-0. I know Nico Williams got sent off very early for a good old-fashioned GAA fullback block, just getting his two hands down on it and stopping the sure goal. And in fairness, Benzema missed the resulting penalty, so it kind of paid off in the moment. But Benzema should have come away with a hat-trick last night. Like he hit the post on another occasion. He looks right on it. Antoine Griezmann is one of these players who, I don't know, just looks at ease in the France squad. Like, I think he kind of sums up where international football is at the moment, that he gets his performance anxiety for Barcelona and doesn't get it for France, even though this is an absolutely stacked French team. Ousmane Dembele, probably the same. Pogba looked good last night. And Kylian Mbappe is Kylian Mbappe. It's very hard to look at even the highlights of that France game last night and make a case that they're not going to win this year's championship. I know I've backed Belgium, so I've already kind of stuck my flag into the ground at this point, but I think it's very hard to make a case against France.
A very important result in terms of the quality of team that we have in our group. Norway required Haaland to score in the 90th minute against Luxembourg to get a 1-0 win.
Yeah.
So, Luxembourg very good these days in international football. Putting some context in that result.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Like, do we not remember the scare they gave? Was it Portugal or Serbia? I've completely forgotten the night. The last night Ireland were out, I've completely forgotten that. But there was definitely a sense that after Ireland lost to Luxembourg, that Luxembourg kind of franked that form anyway. And anybody,
they were 1-0 up against
Portugal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there was that. There have been other moments. We're not that wasn't the Cyprus result. That we're not the ones who've kind of been.
Which of these bad things is worse? Yeah, it's true.
That Norway team as well, like, they're not at the Euros this year, and they're a country who are going to be interesting over the next little while, because you suspect that they should have the talent to actually be a contender at a competition. But let's see them qualify before we actually.
Serbia knocked them out in extra time. That was the problem. That's why they're not there.
Yeah, like they haven't got anywhere near the level of actually being accepted as a contender around Europe. I think we get quite carried away with Haaland being the player who can carry a whole nation. In fairness, that can happen. We've made that point quite a lot in international football. If you've got one striker who is outstanding, that can bring the whole level up.
One of the things that happened in the build-up to the Wales game this week was that Gareth Bale was refusing to deny that he might retire after the tournament. One of the first things Carlo Ancelotti did as the Real Madrid manager was come in and say, oh, no, I'm a big fan of him, big fan of Hazard, a couple of other players as well that he name-checked who you kind of figured were on their way out at Real Madrid. So it looks like he's getting the band back together for one last tour, and maybe that's exactly what that Real Madrid side need if they aren't going to have money to invest in players, because the transfer rumour mill was definitely going overtime in the last 24 hours. Lukaku has said that he wants to stay at Inter. I don't know if that's actually a come-and-get-me plea or to force things around the place, but there is a suggestion that if Lukaku stays there, then Paris Saint-Germain will somehow be forced to sell Kylian Mbappe to Real Madrid, which doesn't really make that much sense to me, but that would mean that they sign Ronaldo, and you would see some other stuff happening as well. So let's just wait and see that the transfer tittle-tattle will get into overdrive now, because there's nothing going to happen, it seems like, between now and the end of the Euros. So we've 6 weeks of football journalists hanging out, talking to agents, and agents trying to puff up the potential for their clients to get a move, but no clubs doing any business while the Euros are on. So it's kind of the worst of all worlds.
And maybe this could actually turn out to be one of the most boring transfer windows ever. Maybe Harry Kane will like the look of Antonio Conte coming to Tottenham and say, yeah, I want to stay put and get 1 year under Conte at least. I would tend to believe the Lukaku thing. He's had obviously a brilliant season, and I think he's quite grateful for the situation that he's in. I think one of the things he puts it down to is Inter Milan just taking great interest in his diet. So there's a number of different things involved there, and it just seems that he's in a perfect situation. So I wouldn't be surprised if that story closed. And as you say, from the Real Madrid standpoint, what money do they have to spend to get players that have shown better glimpses of form in the past than Bale and Hazard? They don't have that cash. But the problem is those glimpses of form are in the past, and there is no guarantee that Hazard and Bale get back to their previous level. I think with Bale he can get to a good level, and he's shown it this season. And while some of his purple patches have been extraordinary, as in like hat-tricks, I don't think that there's that level of consistency for him to be a 30-goal-a-year player. But maybe Hazard has that in him, but it's a bit of a lottery with Hazard's body, to be honest. OK,
we do want to talk about something else. Obviously, the Republic of Ireland are up against Andorra in a must-win friendly, it turns out. A must-win friendly against Andorra tonight. Stephen Kenny's been talking about Patrick Bamford and whether or not he might be tempted now that he hasn't made it to the Euros, despite the fact he's playing the best football of his career for England. Might he be tempted to play for the Republic of Ireland? Have a listen.
I think it's probably, a bit, he was very close to being in the, probably, he's in the scheme of things for, in contention maybe for England for the European Championships. So, I think it's not realistic to suggest that now at the moment, I would feel. I think that was obviously his objective to go to the European Championships with England. I think there's no doubt he's a very good player. He's a quality centre forward, but we have to believe in the talent that we have, and that we have to work to improve it and get better. And it's unusual for players to switch nationality. I'm not saying it never happens, but so quickly after just a situation just been left out of a tournament so quick, it hasn't. There's not many instances of that. People normally it's over a longer period, but so that's what I would say.
But you may feel that's the second highest thing to score in the Premier League, and just making an abysmal squad, and that might lead to a change in opinion on things.
No, I really don't know. I really don't know. I think he is a good player, but he's not a. He doesn't. His objective was clearly to play for England, so we have to respect that.
Yeah, I think this is the right answer here, isn't it? Like, certainly now, maybe in a year's time, if things turn around and Patrick Bamford goes off and discovers, gets on, is it My Genetics, MyDNA.com? What is it? What is Ancestry.com?
My Ancestry, or is it? Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't done any of that stuff. Apparently they take your DNA and they sequence it, and all of a sudden they've got a lot of information about you. Just a little bit. Is that everything that it's made up to be? I don't know. I'm just not sure. I'm certainly not going to give them my blood.
Yeah, you just got. I
might find out that I'm a pasty-faced Irishman, and then what would I do? All these people knowing that.
The strange thing about Bamford is that there was only one situation where Patrick Bamford decides to play for Ireland, and that is if Ireland become good at football again. And Ireland will only ever become good at football again if they have a guy who's banging in goals. So then all of a sudden you've got this strange situation where Bamford comes into a team where he's not necessarily needed. So this is a very mediocre / vicious cycle that we're in with regards to this story, which I don't think is going to end in Patrick Bamford leading the line and helping Ireland reach a tournament.
It's called Catch-22, essentially. So what do? We should stop asking about Patrick Bamford,
so.
right?
I think we should stop asking Patrick Bamford.
He has shut this down.
He has,
really.
Yeah.
Now, he did say there's a bit of a connection there. One of our fitness guys worked with him at MK Dons, and so they've had conversations in the past. Like, that's just your due diligence, right? Like, we're not going to be having a granny rule conversation this time because of an injury, but is the granny rule something that... what do you feel about the granny rule now?
Oh, totally fine with it. Like, if there's somebody who wants to use the rule / exploit the rule, if you want to use that phrase, absolutely, by all means, get on board. But I think Patrick Bamford's been clear that he wants to play for England and does not want to play for Ireland.
OK, this is true, right? What if we change his mind? What if we decided, and what if actually he came into this team which just is lacking a goal scorer? I mean, if we'd had a goal scorer, we might be at the Euros.
Yeah, like, I mean, a goal scorer that night against Denmark, even at the very end of the qualifying campaign. I know Matt Doherty was the goal scorer that night. If Ireland had got 1-0 up and held on to that lead on that night, for example, we'd probably be playing in the Euros this summer.
I'm thinking more the playoff where the chances fell to the wrong.
Chance, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you know, not to name names, but Jesus, he's never going to live that down. If that falls to Patrick Bamford and he sticks it in, and we're going through, suddenly we have national icon Patrick Bamford. How does everybody feel about that then?
I would say totally fine. I'm just more saying we need to stop asking because it's clear what the answer is. Like, there's only so many times you can text somebody and they reject you. And yes, it's worth keeping your finger on the pulse.
Well, you know,
with regards to maybe does he change his mind down the line, but
relationships are complicated.
Relationships are complicated, but we don't want to come across as desperate.
Ebb and flow of human life. So I think Stephen Kennedy's not desperate.
No.
The Irish football population might be a little bit desperate.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, if the assembled hacks keep asking, the smell of want off us might be fairly obvious because there'll be something else to write about. It'll be an excuse to go to watch Leeds games.
Yeah.
I'll go to the Premier League to watch one of the Republic of Ireland players this week. Leeds have Patrick Bamford, you might have heard of him. He's suddenly stopped scoring goals since he decided to play for Ireland, but...
yeah, like, I mean... it's the amount of times that this is... Like, surely now, at this point, we've got all the information that we need on Patrick Bamford.
We do. We definitely, it certainly seems like it's a done deal. But would he be accepted? Like, because I know that there are definitely, this is kind of the reverse Declan Rice, the reverse Jack Grealish, where it was somebody who wanted to play for England, who has played, did he play underage? I'm not sure. But certainly, you know, and then suddenly is available to us. Do we welcome him in with open arms and say, hey, look, you know?
Yes, we do, because football fans are fickle, and we're all fickle, and Republic of Ireland need a goal scorer at the moment, and that's what he is. There will be, like, maybe a couple of days of quiet consternation about it happening in some quarters, maybe, but is Patrick Bamford going to get a cold reception in the Aviva Stadium if he scores a goal? Absolutely not.
If he doesn't score a goal, if he misses, is he given the same...
He'll be scapegoated.
Right.
He'll be scapegoated quicker than other players.
Okay.
Definitely, but...
And is it really bad luck for the Republic of Ireland national team when we do have what we think are some talented young players coming through to give Patrick Bamford 20 to 40 caps?
I would say no, because I would say that he will give those younger players a better opportunity to compete at the major tournament. So it's not just about Troy Parrott, who's coming up behind him. It's also about all the other players around the squad who will be in a better place as a result of playing with a better number 9. Now, I don't necessarily think that international camps are long enough for someone like Troy Parrott or Ida to maybe learn enough off Bamford. Maybe they learn a little bit. It's more for the rest of the team, the other positions, who will suddenly have a better number 9 to work with until Ida is ready to be that leader and to be that goal scorer in the centre forward position, or maybe even beside this fantasy situation of Bamford playing beside him. So I think it just gives everybody a better chance to qualify for tournaments, and qualifying for tournaments is a better look for Ireland and is a better situation for all those players.
All right. Owen Sheahan says yes to Patrick Bamford. Keep going.
But it ain't going to happen.
Even though we're looking a bit desperate here. Keep going. That's the message coming this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock on the show. Going to talk Irish Rugby. Going to give you Euros cheat sheets. We're going to bring you to the sports pages. Jamie Wall is going to talk hurling ahead of the weekend. We have Virtual Insanity with John Duggan. Our Euros cheat sheet. The second one today is Sweden. A discussion about what's on the football pod, where Paddy and Andy have picked their team of the league so far. Be interesting to see. There were certain criteria, so obviously it's not going to be anything like what the All-Star team is, but it will be interesting to see how that team evolves over the course of the season as well. And then Tom English talking about the South African team that the Lions beat the last time there was 2 times ago, when there was a tour, the 97 tour for the Lions down to South Africa. It is 7:50 this morning. Time for our first Euros cheat sheet of the day. And it is Spain, and we're going to go a little bit longer than 90 seconds, I think. Go.
Yeah, well, we'll do a 90-second roundup anyway for Spain. Here we go. So it has been quite a few years for Spain at major tournaments since their all-conquering team of 08 to 2012. At the 2014 World Cup, you had Robin van Persie's diving header showed him the exit door to group stages. In 2016, Graziano Pelle put the cherry on top of Italy's win over them in the last 16. And in 2018, Julian Lopetegui was sacked as manager 2 days before their opening game at a World Cup, a tournament which ended in defeat via penalties to Russia. So we arrive at Luis Enrique's first tournament as Spain manager, and instead of picking the full complement of 26 players, he's gone with just 24, and of course no Sergio Ramos. The squad's average age is, as a result, 2 years younger than the one that went to Russia. Instead of Iniesta and Diego Costa, they will now rely on players like Pedri and Ferran Torres. Ger and I both tipped Spain to win the Euros in our OTB AM crystal ball after watching Torres score that hat-trick against Germany in the 6-0 Nations League win over them last December. And given their depth in midfield with Rodri, Busquets, Thiago, Koke and Pedri all competing for 3 spots, I'm feeling confident. Well, actually, I should say I was feeling confident. That was until I looked at the shaky goalkeeping situation in the team. That was until I looked at Aymeric Laporte and how he could be thrown straight into the deep end after abandoning France and pissing off Didier Deschamps. And that was until I looked at their main man up front. Can we really trust Alvaro Morata to fire Spain to European glory? They've been beaten by Ukraine and have drawn with Switzerland and Greece over the course of the season just gone. There are so many questions about the Spanish side, and those questions are certainly not healed by looking at this jersey. A slightly checkered look when no one asked for a slightly checkered look. And then the away jersey, perfect camouflage for an away trip to, I guess, Finland or somewhere else in the frozen tundra of Northern Europe.
Or England, maybe.
Or England.
Come here, what is the 24 players instead of 26 thing? What the hell?
He says that you're only going to need 18 or 19. That's his reasoning for it. I presume that Sergio Ramos was player number 25. And he knew that he wasn't going to get any game time in an ideal world in this tournament. And maybe that disrupts the balance, leadership-wise, in that squad. I don't know, but Luis Enrique's kind of rationale for that, publicly anyway, is that I'm only going to need 18 or 19 players, so just need 5 beyond that. Strange, though. I think he's the only one other than, obviously, the Czech manager to not go for the full 26.
It's mad, isn't it? Even just for, like, training. When 2 or 3 players are injured, if you want to do, I don't know, that just seems very strange. And they didn't give anybody the number 15 jersey because that's Ramos's jersey.
Yeah, like actually that's definitely worth mentioning. Like you look at other defensive players that are missing from the squad, like, I mean, as I mentioned, the goalkeeping situation is a bit shaky. Kepa's not in the squad, Sergi Roberto, Ger Eoin's not in the squad, Hector Bellerin, Jesus Navas, Danny Carvajal. Obviously Navas not necessarily a defender, but those are a couple of the names that have come up as players who might have been a decent number 25, 26, as you say, for those in-game training sessions. So they've left big names at home. Enrique not afraid to make his point and make a decision, and I don't know, maybe he's done his thing or his due diligence of going around and talking to all the different stakeholders involved in Spanish football, finding out why it has been such a disaster over the last little while and what has gone wrong at tournaments. I'm sure that's what happens. Almost like the Irish Rugby team, trying to find out what went wrong in that industrial estate in France in 2007. Maybe Enrique's doing the exact same thing at the moment, and maybe having your player number 25 and your player number 26 being these legends of the team who are never going to play just upsets the squad. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt at the moment, but that's until obviously the whole thing blows up in their face in a few weeks, and he will definitely just get the blame, and this whole 24-man squad thing will get the blame, even though they might not get any injuries at all.
Yeah, Sergio Ramos, I think, has played 1 league game since January, so it wasn't completely ridiculous to leave him out. What is your prediction here? How are they going to play? Who should we be looking out for, and how deep are they going to go?
I think they're on the top of their group if we start with that, but I think they'll lose in the quarter-final to Portugal. So just to go through the draw, so obviously Poland, Sweden, Slovakia is their group, so they got a handy enough group draw. I think they will top that group. And then their last 16 draw is going to be against Austria, I reckon. So then it'll be a World or a European Championships quarter-final against the winner of England against Portugal. And I've already said that Portugal are going to win that, so I better stick to my guns. And I think Portugal will take Spain this summer. When it comes to some of the other things, like you asked there, how are they going to play? It's going to be a 4-3-3. If we start at the back and the goalkeeping situation, Like, it's going to be David De Gea versus Unai Simon, who is a 23-year-old with Athletic Bilbao. I've read yesterday that Robert Sanchez is going to start versus Portugal in a friendly on Friday. It's the Brighton goalkeeper. You don't start a guy in a friendly against Portugal literally 7 days out from the tournament beginning unless he's in the mix as well. So I make this a 3-horse race. De Gea, Unai Simon and Robert Sanchez all going for that goalkeeper jersey. That is not nailed down at the moment. The centre-back partnership is possibly going to be Aymeric Laporte and Pau Torres. Their backup there is Eric Garcia, who's also in the squad. Again, without Ramos, that position looks shaky. At full-back, the left-back position is going to be between Alba and Gaia. Gaia, the 26-year-old with Valencia, who's had a really good season. On form, he gets the pick. But I just wonder if, with two relatively inexperienced centre-backs and a potentially inexperienced goalkeeper, you just go with Alba as your left-back. And then at right-back, I just wonder, do they go for someone like Cesar Azpilicueta, who has not played for Spain since 2018, but surely given the form he's shown and being a Champions League winner, he gets into the mix in some shape or form when it comes to the starting 11. If it's not going to be him, like you look at Llorente potentially, who's not a natural full-back playing in that position, so maybe he's helped there. So that's how the backs are looking. As I say, when it comes to the midfield, the 6 players that I've already mentioned going for 3 spots is ridiculously strong. If I was to call it, I think Busquets is going to start because he's captain of the squad. He might start ahead of Rodri. And then Koke plays all the time in this team, so he'll be in. And then Pedri's been so good all season, it's very hard to leave him out. But he'll be battling with Thiago for that other position in midfield. So there's no worries about the Spanish midfield. That is set. And then up front, as I mentioned, through the middle, Alvaro Morata, potentially a problem. Gerard Moreno is going to be the other option there. Like, Moreno scored 23 goals in a Liga for Villarreal this season. Morata scored 11 goals for Juventus this season. Maybe you just go with Gerard Moreno and that's it. You just go with the guy in form. You're going to have Ferran Torres in that front 3, who's scored a hat-trick against Newcastle a couple of months ago, but other than that hasn't got a huge wealth of opportunities under Pep Guardiola all season, but has obviously shown ridiculous talent for Spain. And then on the left, finally, it's going to be Dani Olmo versus Oyarzabal, and Olmo's got 5 goals and 10 assists for Leipzig this season. Potentially more of a midfielder, and then Oyarzabal, kind of just the only natural left winger in the squad with Sociedad this season. He probably starts. There's a load of holes that you can pick in this Spain squad. Why exactly we tipped them at the start of the year to win this thing, I think we got carried away on the crest of a wave that the Spanish team that hammered Germany last year are ready now. They will be, but I think maybe 2024 will be their time. I think even Qatar 2022 could come a little bit soon for some of these players. And
the rest of the form not good enough as a national side. Like, bear in mind, a good team in international football will take you very far.
So yeah, so we need to separate form from their qualifying record. They were awesome in qualifying. There's no getting away from that. They were unbeaten in a group which wasn't one of these gimme groups. Like, they had Norway and they had Sweden. They scored 31 goals. They conceded 5 goals. And when we get to the Nations League then, which is a better barometer, they did in fairness top their Nations League group. That was the campaign in which they hammered Germany. They had that loss to Ukraine, and that was the one defeat in that. In the World Cup qualifiers though, since then, they've drawn 1-1 with Greece. They needed a 92nd minute winner to beat Georgia. Aidan McGeady will tell you all about that. And then they beat Kosovo 3-1 in their only win so far. Tomorrow night against Portugal. That'll be a game that a lot of people will be watching. That'll be a real indicator of where they're at, but their World Cup qualification form has not been amazing, and this is a young squad. It's hard to make a case that they'll go all the way, so a quarter-final exit. OK, Euros cheat sheet with Spain in the bag. We will have another one for you coming up a little bit later on. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can always leave a comment for us in the YouTube stream. Brian Dillon says, lads, I'm sad. I know we would have been knocked out in the group stages after losing all 3 games, but I wish we were in the Euros. I didn't care at all last year, height of the pandemic and all that, but now, crowds at matches, squad announcements, what I'd give for Dan McDonald to be convincing us that some lad from League One I've never heard of should make the final squad. A possible goalkeeper crisis, Seamus Coleman injury updates. Sigh. Same, Brian, to be honest. Oh, God, how good it would be to be, like, delving deep into whether or not Sweden are any good again. Here, like, those of us of a certain age were able to open the HSE's vaccine portal and apply for vaccination at some point in the not too distant future. So between now and 12 weeks time, I'll be clean. Like, could we not have had 10,000 over 45s in the Aviva? Could we not have just had a game?
or 4 games,
Maybe,
including a quarter-final.
yeah, maybe Micheál Martin was like, England fans, no thanks.
But not that many England fans would have come. We could have just said, no, sorry, unless you have a passport and we know you can't fill in the form, so tough luck.
And every English player just getting booed on the ball at every moment.
They'd be getting cheered.
Yeah.
Things have changed.
Of course, things have definitely changed. Let's just look at the reaction to maybe some of our Bamford chat.
Neil McEnany says, honestly, I will stop supporting Ireland if Bamford puts on the green. He's not Irish. He wants to play for England. Stop this, please. The fans don't want this. No granny rule, please. There would have been no Italia 90 without the granny rule. Like, there would be no moments of Ireland reaching tournaments and having World Cup quarterfinals. There would be no Walkinstown roundabouts. It just wouldn't have happened without the granny rule.
And
the granny rule exists because Ireland was chronically mismanaged by the people who were ruling us all the way back and all the way, even after we got independence, to the point where emigration was this natural release valve. That's what the official rulers of our country thought about emigration. And so we forced our kids to go and work in England and to live in England, and their kids had kids, and those kids now could play football for us. So it's far more complicated than saying he wants to play for England. Of course he wants to play for England. But somewhere deep in the blood is the right to play for us. And he only has that right because through economic necessity, his family was forced to leave. And so if you say, well, fair enough, okay, but you're closing down the possibility that actually we can have a wider discussion about what it means to be Irish, and maybe Patrick Bamford discovers something. Maybe things change. your feeling changes. And no, we need to turn our back on that and stop. We're going to stop supporting Ireland because it's Ireland for the Irish. I've got a slightly wider definition of what it means to be Irish than that.
It would be great if there was greater sustainability within Ireland in terms of producing players, but it's been something that Ireland have relied on quite some time. It'd be nice to have both, basically, to be able to tap into that element of Irishness and also be able to tap into a brilliant generation of players whose parents have been lucky enough to grow up in Ireland and stay in Ireland and raise their kids in Ireland. So yeah, that's kind of what I think about it. But Bamford's not going to play for Ireland. I hate to break everybody's heart this morning.
8 minutes. If you want to get in touch, 087 918 180 is the WhatsApp number. Of course, you can if you're listening on the podcast, you can always get in touch by the WhatsApp. 087 918 180 is the number for that. Right, let's move on because David Nucifora gave an annual address, I think. Is it once a year? Is it twice a year maybe? He does these roundtable press conferences, and you were at it, Owen, so we have an opportunity here to see some of the stuff. Are we going to explain what we're about to watch first, or are we going to watch first?
I think it's twice a year at this point, isn't it, Nucifora? And I think when we think about what Nucifora has used these press conferences for in the past, it is generally kind of like a State of the Union almost. He's kind of fronting up about everything, and yesterday was quite a lot to do with the financial situation of the IRFU, things looking particularly bleak on that front, things looking a little bit more positive when it comes to a possibility of a full house later on this year in the Aviva Stadium. Quite often you get a situation where there is a World Cup disaster to pick through or a Six Nations disaster to pick through, and sometimes heads roll or certain people are thrown under a bus. I think that there is a general acceptance of circumstance when it comes to some of the down moments in this year's Six Nations, but also the fact that Ireland won that last game against England, I think changes the tone of these conversations completely. The tone of yesterday's conversation then kind of went on to a few other different things. The contractual situation at this time of the year, obviously such a big thing, hoping to sign up Tadhg Furlong for a bit of a longer contract next year when the situation comes back up, and also talks about the fact that CJ Stander was not going to be moved on his decision. It was certainly not a financial decision. He put it yesterday, David Nucifora, which means that I would say the offer from the IRFU was a very generous one, and Stander obviously had his own situation that he wasn't going to continue to play. We were going to play a clip now where we get into the conversation around some of the players, I guess, lower down the pecking order when it comes to the national team, at least, who are going to be leaving these shores. James Cronin and Quinn Roux are a couple of the names mentioned in the question here, and Nucifora was asked if there was any scope to keep those sort of players within the Irish system.
Yeah, well, at the same time, I've just it is rugby as a business too, and you get to a point where you've got to look at You've got to look at affordability. You've got to look at, sometimes you get to a point where you might have talent coming through and it's a decision that has to be made around, cost benefit. And that's the brutal truth of professional sport sometimes. And you've got to say, well, okay, we can't afford to pay that amount of money for a particular player. We have X, Y, or Z coming through underneath that. They're going to be worth more over time. They've got longevity in the position, and we have to keep that churn in that particular position going. And they're just decisions that have to be made at times, and it's unfortunate because you're dealing obviously with people, but at the same time, it is a business, and you have to make business decisions as well as trying to look after them as people. And that's just the way that professional sport works, unfortunately.
Thanks, David. David, just on that point that you made there, could I ask you about the Jason Jenkins move to Munster? Did you consider blocking that move, given the amount of homegrown players in that position and their prospects of game time obviously now being diminished by his arrival?
No, it's not a matter of blocking it. I suppose we talk. We speak with each of the provinces, and we sit down and we look at what the rationale is, and you judge every case individually on how it benefits the system and the teams. And with CJ leaving at very short notice, it disrupted their planning around what they needed going forward in the balance of their team. There are plans in place for how we intend bringing some of the younger players through and what sort of game time and exposure they get. And it was based around CJ being here, I suppose. And when CJ left, we sat down and we discussed how we were going to deal with it. And we looked at a particular type of player that would be suitable to replace CJ. And we looked at the term, the tenure of that contract that would fit back into the model. And a 1-year tenure was agreed between ourselves and Munster, and therefore they had to find someone who was suited what they needed and was happy to take a 1-year deal. And that's how we came up with the decision that was made.
I think that sounds fair enough, right? It's like there's a hole here, we need to fix it. We're not going to fix it with somebody who's going to come in and take 3 or 4 years out. Maybe the young players are going to play a lot more next year than they would have done if CJ was there, but obviously CJ would have been away for those 10, 15 games a season and we would have managed his minutes. So it's a complicated cocktail when it comes to making sure that you've got cover and you still need to be able to reach a European semi-final/final. And
the sense that maybe the Munster pipeline isn't producing players the way it used to as well, and there are a couple of players in those positions who look ripe to actually have a big season next year, and maybe there was a sense that they'll be kind of pushed back a little bit. But I think that signing was confirmed before Stander confirmed his departure, if I'm not mistaken. So the tone is probably a little bit different the way people look at it now, because the Stander thing obviously does change that pecking order quite considerably, with the exception, of course, of those games during the Six Nations. But there was no, as I mentioned, there was no sort of sense from the live section anyway. I know we're going to get into some of the embargoed stuff in a moment, but there was no sense from the live section that Nucifora was out to be overly defensive yesterday about anything. I think there was a real acceptance that Irish Rugby is in the situation that it's in, which isn't a grim one. I think that when it comes to the situation that's affected everybody, that they've done okay. And I mean, it's grim, but it's not like Ireland are doing worse than other rugby unions around the world. Like when it came to the performance of the national team, he kind of referred to this idea of a team dropping off a cliff, and he says that no team should ever be dropping off a cliff at any point, that you might have a slight downturn and then you build back up. So I think that was probably just a little bit of kind of a mention of the form recently, that it has been a little bit of a downturn since 2018 from the national team, but the team will continue to build, and the fact that they haven't had 2 summer tours to build on, or try and build back up, I should say, that's been a big deal, because he mentioned it a couple of times yesterday as well.
It's always worth taking a moment to consider the body of work that somebody in his role has put together over the period of time he's been here, because he's in the final year of the current contract, which is a 3-year deal, and before that it was a 5-year deal. So essentially this is year 7 of 8. Is that correct?
Yeah. And yeah, it does seem that, like, I mean, the decision next year is going to be one that I'd say nobody kind of really knows at the moment. That it does look as if he's leaning outside of the job, actually. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But that's 2022 is the end of his current deal for sure. And I know he spent some time back home in Australia, and maybe the pandemic changes things for everyone at this point. Like, when you go through the newspapers in this morning, who had embargoed stuff to publish, there was also the question around Ronan O'Gara. I'm not sure. The Irish Examiner this morning's their headline is "Courageous O'Gara could coach Ireland without coming home first," which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, so I don't know if this was ever said, but it certainly was intimated in the past that you needed to be part of the coaching setup in Ireland before you would be considered as a candidate for the head coaching job. And, you know, if you look back, traditionally that would have been what would have happened, that somebody would have got the gig from within the Irish setup. This is interesting because if it's... So what exactly is the quote about looking outside the system?
So Nusafora, does someone need to come home? No, there's always different ways of doing things. I'd be a great supporter of people going offshore and gaining new and different experiences. I think Ronan has been really courageous in the moves that he's made to go out there and try and develop himself as a coach, and I think it's a good thing for more of our coaches to do that and gain experience. May it be that he comes back through the provincial system? Maybe, but it's not a requirement. I think there are lots of different ways to get our coaches to develop, and coaching overseas in different environments is a healthy one.
First off, that's true, right? It is really good for many Irish coaches to get as much experience as possible, given that there aren't that many jobs within the Irish system and the Irish setup. And then the best thing is for them to go off and spread their wings, and at some point, if they want to come back. But equally, this opens up the possibility of pretty much anybody getting the Ireland job in the future, which, again, it leaves you more opportunity to get the right person for the job, as opposed to being shoehorned into the specifics of the people who are available at the moment. Now, we have great coaches working in the provincial system at the moment, so it's not really an issue. Like, if the Leinster coaching ticket took the Ireland job, no one would bat an eyelid because of the quality of the work that they've done. And at various stages, if other people from the other provinces were to be part of that backroom team and to be in line for, or if ultimately what they're doing is they're working on Paul O'Connell for him to be an Ireland coach at some point in the future, again, that all makes perfect sense. But say Pat Lam decided at some point that he wanted a crack at international rugby after he's achieved everything he possibly can in the English club game. Because he knows Ireland and has a connection with Ireland, are we saying, no, you can't take the job? Nusafora has opened the door, not just for O'Gara, but for Pat Lam and for people like that too, which seems like a wise thing to do to me. It seems like a progressive moment here. And I have never seen it written down in cold black and white. You need to be working in the provincial system. Maybe it was certainly the impression that we had. And I think that's like a significant shift. Now, if you're a player reading that saying, I think it's good for you to go off and have experience offshore and learn new things, you're like, well, you don't mean for me though, do you? I mean, Tyke Furlong's not reading that going, that's interesting. Does that apply to me?
Yeah,
Can I have a year earning £1 million, 2 years earning £1 million and still play in the World Cup? How does that sound? Would that work?
Like, what's interesting there that you mentioned that now is about the pathway for coaches in Ireland. One of the things that he mentioned in his opening address yesterday is that Matt Wilkie is gone from the IRFU. So he would have been, I'm going to get his correct title, IRFU Head of Coach Development. So he's left the role, and I presume that they're looking for somebody to step up to that. So development of coaches is something that Nusafora said has been affected over the last little while, and they are, I guess, maybe at the mercy of the provinces essentially putting in a body of work that suggests that they're being run by the right people on a coaching level, and that those coaches then are ripe for picking by the IRFU. And I guess that's a fair enough system, because that's the only level that you're going to get outside of Test rugby that closely resembles Test rugby, which is Pro 14 and Champions Cup rugby. So that's probably the system at the moment that works the best. But there is this legend of the game who is doing great things away from Ireland at the moment, and if there is an unwritten rule that you have to come up through the ranks, then you can see why they would make an exception if it were to come to that.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense as well. The other thing is that, like, on balance, there's two things here. There's the issues that you might have with what Nucifora has done, and there's clearly, and it's fine to have those issues, and everybody should excavate them. And the relationship with the team, how much of a hands-on role does he have, and like what's that relationship like with the coaches, and then the hard and fast rule on whether or not players are allowed to go and why the exception was made for Sexton and all that kind of stuff. And the club game, I know, is a constant stick that people bring up to kind of say, well, why is he not fixing the problems with the club game? But you've got to also bear in mind that if he wasn't there, what was there beforehand, and just how chaotic a lot of this decision making was that was going on before there was somebody whose job it was to manage the ebb and flow of the contractual situation. And we don't know what life would have been like if they'd had a different character there instead of him. But on balance, you would say that most of the stuff, I think loads of the decisions they've made over the years have been wrong. But on balance, you would say that Irish Rugby is better for having somebody in that role, and he's doing a reasonable job in that role.
It's interesting when you kind of think about what is the job spec. Like the club game, dying on the vine, has been a massive failure within Irish Rugby. I'm not sure, is that the failure of a certain individual, or is that the failure of Irish Rugby itself to allow it to die? And even if using the word allow is actually unfair, maybe this was just a natural reaction to raging professionalism in rugby and the national team becoming the clear product that everything was geared towards within Irish Rugby, that the provinces became their own different behemoths all around the country, that maybe the club game dying was just going to be a natural reaction. But it still happened, and there will still be questions asked of people at the top of the IRFU as to how that happened and what efforts are being made to resurrect that. And it does seem that it's been a conversation that's been happening for quite a long time, and there isn't any more clarity as to how the club game will get any more relevant, and maybe that just doesn't happen in the short-term future. The same goes for the women's game. Nucifora listed off a lot of nice-sounding initiatives that are happening with the women's game yesterday. He's definitely of the opinion that grassroots work needs to be done before we even entertain the idea of professional rugby. He seems pretty clear in that, in fairness, and I think when somebody's got a clear idea of what they're doing and they go ahead and do it, that's fine. But I think that personally I maybe would disagree with that a little bit, that actually having a professional model in the short term may actually encourage the grassroots level as well. Now, of course, we're looking at an organisation who has had 2 massive years of incurring massive debt. So maybe actually starting up a new professional system is just not a runner right now, and that's the truth to why this isn't happening in the short term. But if that wasn't as much of an issue as maybe it could be, then I do think that the sooner the better, or even a timeline of when Irish Rugby wants to see professional rugby brought in the women's game might be good, because at least if you're a younger player, you could be like, all right, I'll get a few years at the end of my career where I'm getting paid to do this thing.
Yeah, all right, 18 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. If you've got reaction to any of the rugby news, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9180 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream as well, or you can get us on Twitter at Off The Ball. We will be back talking hurling with Jamie Wall next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
I signed with the Rod squad in 2011, that summer. Do you know, like you hear, I signed in the back of a smoke pack. Roddy, I would say, is like the Irish Harry Redknapp. We lost that championship game against Donegal. We didn't lose a game for 7 years after that. I tell you, we were angry after that game. Dublin came back, I remember, in 2015, it was, we're putting this right.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Invisible Threads, a Go Loud original.
As we celebrate the 6th anniversary of marriage equality, Invisible Threads meets older members of the LGBTQ community who reflect on their journeys and tell their stories. From shame and isolation to conversion therapy, from living with fear to coming out as an older person. Join me, James O'Hagan, for this powerful 8-part series, winner of the first Go Loud Podship.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
20 minutes past 8 this morning. If you've just joined us, you're very welcome along. We're going to bring you through the sports pages. Start with otbsports.com, and it's Andy and Paddy pick their best 15 of the league so far. That is the Gaelic football story there. Some soccer story. Gaza recalls awkward encounter with Hoddle after World Cup snub. Kenny gives his view on a potential Ireland switch for Patrick Bamford. That is a soccer story. And how do we stop the problem of physical abuse of NBA players? John Gonzalez of The Ringer was on with Joe last night on Off the Ball talking about this, as well as speaking with Tom English about his new book about the 1997 Lions tour, where they've done a deep dive on that tour and got some decent nuggets, really. Peter Clohessey's desire to go on the tour, even though he was injured, and then the Lions were like asking for their gear back, and he was I don't think they got it back. Worth listening back to the podcast for that. You can subscribe to it on the OTB Podcast Network. The best place to get that these days, of course, is on the OTB Sports app. Just hit subscribe and you'll get it, and they can even send you a notification anytime there's a new episode, so it's a single click away if you want it. I'll very quickly run through the back pages of the rest of the papers here before we get into hurling. Time to see light shine at end of windless tunnel, and that's the picture of the National Stadium in Andorra. GA may need Sliotar move to curtail Munster freeze, says Shefflin. And Noosa Forward gives Farrell green light for Lions and backs up Gara for future. That was the other part of that, is that Andy Farrell will be allowed to join up with the Lions after the 2 tests that Ireland play. No excuses as Ireland try to develop winning way in Andorra. Chance to arrest alarming decline in goal scoring. This is since 2018, Ireland have a meagre return of 21 goals from their 30 games played. I think that's half the number that Lewandowski scored this year in one season. Saka debut goal seals it for England, and Noosa Forward Irish Rugby is in reasonably healthy shape, this despite the fact that they've lost so much money. Story from England, one of their cricketers who made a debut yesterday, took 2 wickets, and then his tweets from when he was an 18 and 19-year-old were exposed as being disgustingly racist and sexist. In that one, that is the story. It's on all the back pages. Ollie Robinson is his name. The Guardian also have a picture of Trent Alexander-Arnold being subbed off after he went pulled up injured in England's game last night. And Spurs continuing to talk with Antonio Conte over the manager's job. And then the rest of them, no Bam for this book. Bammy Dodger, boss, Kenny call Patrick. And we habit all to do. Kenny wants winning habit to kick in from tonight. So
Bammy Dodger is very good.
Bammy Dodger. All our fault. Conor Horan says it's the player's fault, not the manager's fault. And is there another pun? There isn't. No. Light at end of tunnel is the picture from James Collins trying to score for us tonight. James Collins' shoulders, they have a lot to bear. Right, let's move on because time for us to turn our attention to hurling. I'm delighted to say Jamie Wall is with us this morning. Jamie, good morning to you. How are you?
Well, Ger, how are you?
Yeah, good. Owen is getting us all excited about the fact that we're a month away from one of the best sporting weekends of the year, which also involves a fairly seismic Munster hurling clash. This weekend, we get to watch a preview of it. How relevant is it? How important is it? How could it not be relevant given how close it is?
It's very relevant, but how important it is probably a better question. I would probably say that it's going to be interesting in terms of how they deal with it, but not necessarily that important in terms of, I don't know if we'll be able to come away drawing too many conclusions from what has gone on the pitch, if that makes sense.
A little bit. Now, regular viewers will know, particularly Owen, will know how obsessed I am with this kind of bit where you have the opportunity to kill your opponent. You don't go, oh, look, I'm going to let you find a little bit of rhythm here and get a bit of confidence. And I think if you're in a winning position, you should go out and win, particularly against an opponent you're about to face again.
Yeah, I think, and funny enough, when you're talking about that killing side of things, I actually watched the Tiger Woods documentary last night, and that was something that kind of really came through. I watched both parts, and it was something that really kind of came through. I think what you're saying is very relevant if you're talking from a Limerick perspective, but less so from a Cork perspective. And I suppose the reason I think that, and this isn't just the kind of bit of Kerry blood in me and I'm yerring and yodeling away all morning, but I do think I think that's more relevant from a Limerick perspective in that they are in a winning habit. And I know not necessarily in the immediate term, but in the sense that they're the dominant team, they're the tiger, if you will. They're the one that, you know, have been winning in the big games. And I suppose for them, it's a case of if they can put their foot down on Cork's throat and say, no, that little bit of momentum you got, that's just the league, shut up and get back in your box, then great. From Cork's perspective, I don't know if there's a whole lot to be gained from showing your hand too much. Obviously, you need to kind of stick with the processes that you put in place to an extent and try these things out. And I'm not saying you go full Q-tour and kind of play a dummy team totally, but by the same token, I think it's one thing people seeing your games and analysing them, but it's another thing giving someone a complete feel for it in the flesh. So I suppose I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I think that makes sense when you look at, you know, the big consistent winners like Kilkenny back in the day, what Limerick are trying to become now. That element of we're just going to become untouchable makes sense. But I suppose if you're the contender and you're Cork, we'll say, for example, which is what Cork are going into this game, let's make no bones about it, then I think you probably have to come at both from a slightly different perspective would be the way I look at it.
We had Taggy Fogarty on Friday night, and he was saying that they had an aura right when they were in their pomp, and as they started to lose games, the aura slipped a little bit. And he was just making the point that Limerick kind of need a win at the moment just to make sure that aura is still there. That's my contention here, is that for Cork to get out and win this game this weekend would be like, you have the chance. It's not going to be a crisis from Limerick's perspective, because obviously it's only the league and they can fix it, right? But it might be a little bit of a crisis. There's certainly doubt in their minds. You don't know that it won't, you know, like inject a little virus into the system and see what happens. Create the chaos.
I don't know. I think
you're playing those cards close to the chest from Cork's perspective.
No, it's not that at all. No, it's not that. I think any other year you might have a point, but I think this year it's very easy for, you know, people who are good psychologically, which Limerick are, and they have a good setup there. It's very easy for you to, I suppose, you know, to move these points on and not really get too bogged down in the results side of it. I think coming into the league this year, I would have classed it as the least important national league, hurling-wise, by the way. I would have classed it as the least important national league in terms of the result. And I would have thought the only thing that really mattered here was getting your players through it without injuries, without picking up injuries, getting game time for this championship, and kind of, if you're a team like Cork, developing your style of play. If you're a team like Limerick, just honing it, maybe getting one or two additions. Okay. So, look, any other, like, I don't know, I hate to be raining down on this brainstorm that you have, and I understand where Taggy was coming from in terms of, you know, aura and that, I suppose, but they were doing that for 10 years and it was a hugely competitive national league. And what you have to remember is that was happening over the course of 7-8 month season. Like, this is very much these games, like the first 2 games of the National League were challenge games, and like played out in front of empty stadiums to boot. Like, let's not lose sight of that. You know, I don't think, I would say any other year there might be merit to that, and there is a small degree of merit to it, but I wouldn't be overly panicked about it if I was Limerick, from a Limerick perspective. And, you know, like, they're going to win their last game before they go into the championship regardless. Like, so I would say if they can come out of the whole thing having blooded a few players and being kind of championship ready, I don't think they're going to be overly worried.
It definitely is the least important league we've ever seen in terms of the league title itself. Like, I mean, in not even having league finals, for example, in football, I think completely just destroys the whole relevance of the competition. However, as you say, these are challenge games, and teams behind closed doors in previous years will have tried stuff in challenge games that they will be bringing to the table in championship. So maybe people are looking at it from that perspective as well, Jamie, that it's like, what can we actually learn rather than reading into the results too much. So what have you seen from the cards that Cork haven't kept too close to their chest over the last little while?
Definitely. Well, listen, the first thing that is very plain is the support play kind of game that they're looking at. And A little bit of a throwback to that kind of running game that, we'll say they pioneered under Donal O'Grady, and I don't think it's any coincidence that Donal O'Grady has gone in. I think that's been well documented anyway, so I don't need to labour that point. But, look, like I said, games are behind closed doors, so you're getting to see them on telly rather than in the stadium, and it's quite hard to really see exactly what's happening when you're on telly. But I was fortunate enough, I got to go to the Waterford Cork game with TG Carr and that, and one thing that was very, very clear was the running off the ball that was going on, and probably one of Cork's first puck outs, Damien Callahan, and he was doing it for the entire game, was he was taking the ball almost on that half turn. He was half turned out, he was half looking at Patrick Collins, and it was going straight to him. He was going out giving the pass, but what was most interesting was, even though he's full back, and I think full backs of yesteryear would be getting cold sweats and they think of it, like, he was just continuing on his run. He was far more like a footballer, which I suppose he is. He's far more like a footballer than a hurler in that sense, in terms of his run. And I think Darragh Fitzgibbon got a score off it. It was right before the water break. And if you actually watched it back, Callahan was actually going past him on the 45. And it made the Waterford player hold off. And it was just after the water break then you saw Tim O'Mahony and Darragh Fitzgibbon go beyond the ball again in that support run. And it ended up in a goal like 2-3 minutes later from a very similar play down the left-hand side. So that's definitely a card Cork haven't kept close to their chest. I suppose they didn't have a choice in terms of keeping it close to their chest, and they have to develop it. What I think is going to be most interesting from a Cork perspective is whether they can, I suppose, develop not so much a plan A or not so much a plan B, but a kind of a second plan A to run alongside this, because you know yourself, pardon the pun, you can't just keep running the ball in any sport. Like, you look at other sports, look at American football, the point of a run game sometimes is to open things up for a passing game and vice versa, and it's the same for Cork here. If you look at, we're talking about Cork and Limerick, you look at the best in the business is probably Limerick. Like, they like to play it short, they like to play it through the lines, but very often Diarmuid Burns just launches one at the back stick to Aaron Gillan, when that space has been closed up. So I think for Cork now, I think maybe, the thing that the card they have shown is their intentions to kind of run the ball, and it's whether they can add a variety then in terms of a slightly more traditional aspect to their game. I suppose, like, having that variety going would stand to them. So it'll be interesting to see if they can marry the two.
Henry Shefflin was out doing media yesterday and was talking about the worries he has for hurling as a sport, and says maybe there's less goals, more long-range points. Cork are railing against that. Cork are saving hurling at the moment, Jamie, with their goal-scoring exploits. Is that a natural extension from the running game? Is that why they're scoring so many goals?
Definitely, yeah. Like, it's like you said, if guys are running off the shoulder and if the space is there, then you're going to create overlaps. And if you create overlaps, you're going to create goals. Like that shouldn't be. That's not revolutionary. I'm certainly not the smartest guy in the room by putting that together. I wouldn't get too bogged down in the whole thing. I think the Limerick game is going to be a nice little test of that, because they are one of the teams that are best set up to not concede goals. Look, I think the game against Westmeath is an aberration. I think, unfortunately for Westmeath, they got drawn into kind of a bit of a lion's den there with that group. And, with the exception, like, when you look at the two groups, they got all the All-Ireland contenders, with the exception of Kilkenny, are in that group together with them. You have the last 3 All-Ireland winners in the last 4 All-Irelands. The last 5 All-Irelands are all in that group as well, Kilkenny are the only All-Ireland finalists since 2013 not in their group. So I think they kind of got a short straw there, in that they got no chance to develop. If you look at the other group, Antrim, they were finding competitive against Kilkenny. They beat Clare. You look at Laois, they're never getting blown away too badly in those games, because there's a small bit of a step in there. So look, I wouldn't read too much into the 7 goals against Westmeath. And I suppose the only reason I qualified that is I don't want to be slating Westmeath or anything. I don't think it's their fault, but there is just it takes a couple of games to get up to that level. The 5 goals against Waterford was definitely something that you could look at the way the Cork were playing, because the two things Cork's goals mainly came from that day were turnovers.
Oh, you've just gone mute there, Jamie. Honest, we've lost the audio to you there, Jamie. I don't know if there's a call coming in or a message or something. We'll try and get your audio back there in 1 second. It's really interesting the influence that backroom team is having, and you know, we've talked before about the travelling Wilburys aspect of the supergroup.
You got a good laugh out of Cyril Farrell when you used that cultural reference.
Did you know what it was?
No.
Really, you didn't?
Sorry, I'll do a quick Google here, and I'll engage in conversation about the travelling Wilburys.
It's a supergroup, right? It's the whole notion of a supergroup coming together.
Oh, it's... I see. Sorry, yeah. I thought it was a TV show. I thought it was... it's the... okay, right. So who's Tom Petty in this? Who's Bob Dylan in this?
Hey, names you recognise.
Assuming... who is... I'm not going to name off any other names because the Wikipedia thing doesn't go that far.
Roy Orbison.
Roy Orbison's in it, right. Great. What a super group, Jeannie Mac. Right. Donald O'Grady's Roy Orbison.
No, Kieran Kingston's Roy Orbison. He puts the band together.
Okay, right. This is an education. The Avengers basically would have been a better cultural reference.
Well, I'm not sure Sarah Farrell would have got it. Jamie Wall, you're back with us. Here we were talking about the influence of the backroom team, and
I caught the bit about Roy Orbison. I was a small bit unsure what was going on there.
So was I, Jamie.
Have you heard of the travelling Wilburys?
No.
Oh, right.
That's before my time.
For God's sake, Ger, you're just completely alienating the youth of society.
Well, and explain my point.
There was a nightclub in town called Wilburys before, but again, that was before my time as well. So.
Ger's basically making the point that Cork have gone all Avengers Assemble on their coaching staff, basically, and have got all the great minds together, and they're going to destroy everybody with this collection of brilliance.
Yeah, well, it's a good market management, in fairness, here in Kingston. I think, isn't it that saying that, when you're the manager, the job is to not be the smartest person in the room. And I think he's done a very good job of getting, he's kind of got Donald O'Grady, and knowing that we're all going to be here talking about Donald O'Grady instead of Kieran Kingston. And I think when you've got a manager who's willing to do that, that's a huge sign, and that's probably a strong part of why Cork are progressing. But you've also got Christy O'Connor there, and I think Christy O'Connor is going to be very important for Cork this year, especially as a former goalkeeper. He's written a lot of good pieces in the Echo in Cork in terms of, and spoken about puck out retention and stuff like that. And I think that's very important, number one, in terms of, the way the game is going with puck outs, but number two, in terms of, Cork are trying to bed in a new goalie this year with Patrick Collins. Obviously, he's been in the panel for a couple of years, but it's a different thing being number one. So, I think just those two examples alone, before we even get into the rest, shows that Cork have put together a very strong management team.
The one thing, and I'm just stick with this for a sec, right? Cork hurling fans must be the most brutalised group of sports fans in Irish life, simply by virtue of the fact that as long as I was alive, they were the most confident and self-sure, and rightfully so, because of the quality of hurling that they had been raised on. And yet, they are now officially in one of the longest famines in Irish sports history for a superpower. So, do you allow yourself little moments of idle dreaming about what might be possible this year, or are you all, as a race, so brutalised that you don't know what it feels like to be hopeful again?
I don't know about that. I don't think you could ever say that Cork hurling people are so brutalised that they're not capable of dreaming about winning the All Ireland. I think someone said that there was Cork people talking about winning the All Ireland after we beat Waterford. I don't think that's something we're lacking. I don't think we're going to be short of people with idle dreaming. I'm pretty convinced there are people in Cork who reckon we're going to win the All Ireland this year. At the start of every year, that's kind of one of the beauties for Cork people, is that they do wake up at the start of the year thinking, okay, we're going to win the All Ireland this year, even when it's absolutely preposterous to say so. I don't think they're as far away, by the way. I don't think they're as far away as maybe some people think, but equally I don't think it's this year. But if this year could be the start of a kind of 2-3 year process, I do think there's a very good chance for Cork to be successful. And I suppose part of the thinking for that is, I think we're 2-3 years on now. I kind of always forget about the last year that's just gone by, because it just seems to nothing. It was kind of a nothing like, but we're 2 or 3 years gone by since Cork were in an All-Ireland under-21 final. I know they lost to Tipperary, but I would say that they have probably more good players in that team than what Tipperary will get out of it. The following year, they were well beaten by a better Tipperary team in a 20s final, but I suppose the point I'm getting at is you will have a couple of 23, 24-year-olds in the next year or two, you know, which are, they're grown men there, like, and you have then got a very strong cohort of players. You've UCC have won the last 2 Fitzgibbon Cups in a row, largely backed by players from Cork. So there's a strong enough group coming there. And I would say that if they can use this year as that sort of springboard, I think there's a very good chance going forward. But at the moment, I can't speak for everyone else in Cork. It's quite a large county,
Go on.
with quite a lot of people. But I'm not idly dreaming that they're going to be tasting All-Ireland glory this year. But I certainly don't think it's a million miles away either.
Well, that's you got hope. That's the main thing. The hope hasn't been beaten out, and I think some of it has to do with the fact that the Avengers have assembled, and there's a pathway back to previous glory and a plan in place that's clearly visible to everybody.
Definitely, yeah. It's like that's probably the big thing, you know, that word plan, like, and I think it's more important that they have a plan than it be a perfect plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like, at least if everyone's going in the one direction, if it's not perfect, that's fine, as long as they're going in that direction. And it's certainly something that's visible, is that there is a kind of a direction to Cork's hurling at the moment. I suppose, like I said at the top there, I hope that they can maybe add a bit of variety. I'm all for the support game, by the way. I'm not going to be grumbling on the ditch saying let it in or roaring or bawling like that, you know, as you might hear from some more traditional people. But I do think a bit of variety will actually make the run game more effective for them. So I think, yeah, definitely. I think, you know, having that plan and that coherent thought to the way they play the game has definitely helped Cork.
Were people giving out about the short puck outs against Tip?
Oh yeah, Jesus, yeah. Like, they were giving out about sharp puck outs against Waterford. Like, they were, like, I think Cork scored 2 goals from it, but like, they were still giving out about it. Like, people tend to see what they want to see, especially with hurling. You know, it's one of those things that if you give away a sharp puck out, people will go nuts over it, but they won't go nuts over you putting a 100-yard ball with snow on it down on top of Dan Morrissey or someone, and he just plucks it out of the sky and Limerick get a score off it. Like, they don't actually see that as the direct they don't see the direct cause and effect, we'll say, from that. You know, people just see long is far away from our goal, that's good. Short is close to our goal, that's bad. And that's fine, you know, but I think I wouldn't be too worried. I think Cork sharp puck outs make sense. I think, again, like, I'm constantly speaking here now about variety and that, like, but I think sometimes you have to go so far to a certain point to test things out and see what works and see what doesn't, and there's always a kind of a learning point with it, you know. You look at any other sport, look at soccer teams playing out from the back, people say, like, oh, if they get it far away from the goal they won't concede, but they don't see the scores that they get from playing out from the back, you know. Or they don't see that, oh, if you booted up the field and the other team get the ball for 5 minutes and you can see that at the end of that 5 minutes that has actually come from you just booting it when you could have passed it 10 yards to your right. So it's about variety, you know. It's about sometimes not being afraid of a clearance, but equally, you know, when you can play the ball out smart, and when there is a short puck out there, like, if a team give you that short puck out and if you've got a plan on how to use it, then why wouldn't you use it, you know? Like, Cork got more scores from short puck outs than they conceded from short puck outs, certainly against Waterford, the game I was actually at. You know, I think you can see things a lot clearer there, and you can see what's going on in front of you a lot clearer. And I think that's probably something that, you know, when crowds come back, I think it'll make more sense to more people when they can see what's actually happening in front of their eyes. Because, you know, when you're watching it on a television screen, at best you can only ever see probably a third of the pitch. You know, you can't see what's happening 80 yards down the pitch and why a goalie is reluctant to puck it down on top of what might be happening down there.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Jamie, great stuff. Enjoy the game. Thanks a million.
No bother. See you, lads.
Jamie Wall giving us some thoughts there about Cork and Limerick at the weekend. I think it's going to be interesting. The reason I asked that question about the famine is because I still think one of the biggest what-ifs in Irish sports history, there are a few, obviously. What if Roy Keane had played in Saipan, or hadn't left after Saipan? But what would have happened hurling if the strikes hadn't happened, if there'd been peace with the county board, if Donal O'Grady and John Allen had stayed on, any combination of that as the Cork management team, and there'd been peace within that camp, and they had come up against the greatest Kilkenny team of all time, what level of rivalry would we have got to? Because we'd already had 3 Ireland finals, we'd already had 3 years where, obviously Galway interrupted that, but where these teams were getting up to each other, and the second spin of Kilkenny as it was driven on after that Galway game, what would that have been like coming up against the short puck out and Donal Logue and that team?
Yeah, it's really, like, they were the one team who were really leading the way when it came to innovation in the game. Obviously, Kilkenny had a better bunch of players who just had talent all around the pitch, and of course they were very shrewd as well.
A deeper bunch. I don't know about better. I mean, certainly there were more of them, but like that Cork team were absolutely sensational.
They were a very talented bunch, but like the thing that you definitely think about is that they thought around games in a more advanced way than most other counties at that point. So how would that development have actually got to, or what stage would it have got to in the late 2000s had things been a little bit more peaceful in the county? And also as well, what would have happened to maybe some of the younger Cork teams coming through when it comes to that level of coaching and expertise that would have dripped down through all the different parts of Cork. Like, they are the superpower in hurling. Like, there's no getting away from it. They're not a superpower, they're the superpower. Until Dublin actually come along and own hurling at some point down the line, Cork is still the superpower in the sport, and the drought is way too long for a county of their size and of their importance. The 2010s, I think, the first decade without an All-Ireland, I want to say since the very early 20th century, since the first couple of decades. I want to say, I know somebody that statistic's been thrown out there a lot.
Imagine the scenes when they win one.
It's going to be incredible, and it will happen eventually. There's just too many good hurlers in Cork for it not to happen. Like Jamie points out there that people were maybe getting carried away a little bit after the Waterford results and thinking about the All-Ireland. I think that's just natural with Cork at the moment. I think no matter who you are, I don't think it's actually unique to Cork. I think if there's any team who, like say for example at the start of the next Premier League season, if Manchester United win their first couple of games, everybody will be thinking Manchester United are going to win the Premier League. That's what comes with being for a team of heritage and a team that believe that they can do great things in sport. That's what Cork are, and they will. Like, I'll be very surprised if we go another decade without Cork winning an All-Ireland. It should happen in the next couple of years, and I think that there is more substance to the idea that they're dark horse this year. They've always been mentioned as a dark horse.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's proper substance to it, and I think that we should see some this weekend. Very interesting to hear though that Jamie thinks the opposite direction, that actually a defeat this weekend is not in any way it's not going to matter for them. So maybe they don't pick a dummy team. Maybe they make several changes. Very interested to see those team selections when the ball is thrown in that game this weekend, and we'll keep a close eye on it for you on otbsports.com. It's 8:47 this morning, time for us to join John Duggan. John, good morning to you.
Ger and Owen, how are we?
Very good. As a Clare hurling fan, I presume you shed no tears for the long drought of Cork hurling.
Oh, no, I do. I said this to Brian Gavin and Timmy McCarthy, on Saturday's panel. I want to see Cork hurling win All-Irelands again, because Cork, to me, Cork hurling is an idea. It's not necessarily just a team, it's an idea. It is that swagger, it is that confidence, it is that cocksure attitude. The supporters very, very sure. And I grew up as a Clare hurling fan, always knowing that Cork would cause us a huge amount of pain, as it did in the 70s and 77, 78 were very, very bitter finals for Clare to lose, having been league champions at the time. 1986 was a tough one. And Cork always, it didn't really matter what the season was, and 1990 was a great example of that. They would always have the potential to come out of nowhere and win all Ireland. But that in the last 15 years has gone. That kind of confidence has become a question mark, and I want to see that back, and I want to see Cork at the table. I would think Kilkenny are the superpower of hurling. I would say, on the basis of All Ireland's won, that they would be to the superpower of hurling to me in 2021. But Cork have got a huge legacy. And the last gap that I remember of this instance was 54 to 66, but this is now a longer gap.
I guess I kind of meant more in the sort of playing population and the explosive potential of the county. Of course, when it comes to the greatest hurling county of all time, you can't argue against Kilkenny. No question about that. It's
time for another virtual insanity, John.
It is. Those was it the toxic danger signs, the kind of the yellow signs? We'll probably have to get a background of one of those, and flammable and don't touch and whatever. But I've been doing this for 18 years, I suppose, on various national platforms, and you are going to have times when the crystal ball is a bit shattered on the ground, and you're using Pritt stick and sellotape to see through the crystal ball. The shards of it all over the place, but we haven't lost a huge amount of money. We've been around breaking even all year and slightly bit down at the moment, but we always live in hope, and the hope is the Memorial Tournament this Thursday, which is today, starting in Ohio with Padraig, Sheahan and Rory McIlroy all in the field. My headline tip is Patrick Cantlay, 22-1. I'm back in the Patrick bandwagon after the Masters disaster. 3 each way, and Patrick, who is brilliant with his ball striking in the USPGA, just couldn't put anything. Was in the top 10 of the final day to triple on 17. He won this tournament, the Memorial, a couple of years ago with a 64 in the final round. I think he's a solid each way bet as the headline tip for Patrick Cantlay. Ricky Fowler is coming back, I think, to a bit of form. Love those shades in that image. 60-1 for 2 each way. On his debut at the Memorial in 2010, he was second again in 2017. Is happy with his game. Is 101st in the world. It's hard to believe Ricky Fowler, who's been in a real slump, but I think he's coming back to something. Maybe chancing this week for an each way chance at 60-1. The third tip, the first of 2 South Africans, Christian Bezuidenhout, who I think is really improving on the US Tour, 22nd in this last year, played well again at the PGA, shot up for such a long way, 80-1 for 2 each way. He has proven it that he can win on the European Tour. I think a win in the States might not be too far away for him. The second one, the South Africans, Charles Schwartzel, is now injury-free. Is really happy with his game, had 3 top 21s, including in the third at the Byron Nelson before he missed the cut at the PGA. But Charles Schwartzel, a former Masters champion, has good form at the Memorial 3 times in the top 11 at 100-1. He's one that really interested me for 2 each way. One of the outsiders is Doug Gim, making his debut in this tournament, 125-1. He's got the ball striking chops as the former top college golfer in America to maybe contend this week. Doug Gim, who was 14th last week in Texas, and an outsider who I've been noticing hanging around leaderboards for quite a while now, Richie Wawrinski, who at 200-1 is worth €1 each way. Won on the tour last year at the Barracuda Championship, played well at Bay Hill, was third. That was third in the team event then in New Orleans recently, and played well again at the PGA. So Wawrinski and Gim are the kind of stragglers, the €1 each way bets. Bezuidenhout, Fowler. I really do like Charles Schwartzel this week. I've had a bit on myself, but the headline tip is Patrick Cantlay.
Patrick Cantlay, around about 22-1 is the best price you got for Patrick Cantlay out there. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. Obviously got John Ram, Bryson DeChambeau, Justin Thomas, Rory, Victor Hovland, so many elite players. Once again, it's going to be a great tournament out of the US Open at Torrey Pines. But I do think Patrick Cantlay, the way he hit the ball at the PGA and with the form that he has at Jack Nicklaus's track, I do think is a solid each way bet.
And the McIlroy situation, so the initial headline I saw was he was out, but actually it was just out of the Pro-Am. Is there clarity just yet? And he's
no clarity. The representatives didn't give clarity to the press requests for comments. He didn't do his Pro-Am or hold his press conference for personal reasons. So I don't know what the reasons could be. But yeah, he wasn't there. Obviously, he won't be fielding questions now about a myriad of subjects, like his performance at the PGA or Naomi Osaka or all these kind of things. But like, there could be obviously very legitimate personal reasons for why he wasn't in front of the media yesterday. I'm sure we'll hear from him over the next few days because he's so popular, Rory. And of course, we've got a major in a couple of weeks.
Okay, due to tee off at 6:44 Irish time today, alongside Adam Scott and Victor Hovland. Shane Lowry and Porrick Harrington also in action. I just want to have one quick mention for our boy Troy Merritt, who is of course a friend of the pod. He likes it around here. He's done very well around here, and certainly Nathan has been chatting about his chances. So he's 100-1.
Played well last week, yeah.
Yeah, and he's 100-1. And if you want to do the first round leader, I think he's. I can't find the first round leader odds at the moment, but they're generally around the same for the tournament, aren't they?
Around the same generally, yeah. You get less places, but the thing with the first round leader is always check the weather forecast, because sometimes you might have wind coming in the afternoon or vice versa, and then you can go with someone. But like Troy Merritt has been playing well recently, and I wouldn't put anybody off what you're saying.
Yeah, and if you want more from Troy, of course, you should subscribe to Golf Weekly, patreon.com/Golf Weekly or otbsports.com/Golf Weekly for the details on that as well. Anything else, John?
No, just looking forward to our first win. If we don't win tonight, lads, we just might as well give it all up.
Could we just not have a national football team for a decade or so? I mean, we no basketball team for a decade or so, and basketball seems to have come back stronger for it.
No, we'd have to have the constant drama around the national team, because it really is. The drama in itself is almost as much of a sport as the sport. But no, I'd be hopeful we'll get a job done. What I'm more interested in seeing is who plays. Does Jamie McGrath play? Will we have the likes of John Egan back in the team, Josh Cullen, and any of the younger lads that Stephen wants to play? So I just want to see a win and a good performance. Other than that, like the matches last night, nothing of huge import with them. With Trent Alexander-Arnold getting injured, a lot of French Open action today, and Jordan Lee involved in the Para-Athletics Championships and racing at Leopard's Town. But it's all about Patrick Cantlay, Ricky Fowler, Christian Buswaite, and how Charles Forsell, Doug Gimman, Richie Orensky this week, lads. Bye.
Virtual insanity, good stuff, JD. Thanks a million for that. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. So a lot of comments coming through about the Ireland situation. We're going to get to those in just a moment. I want to play you this, right? Ireland obviously in action at 5 o'clock this evening against Andorra. Here's Conor Harahan talking to Will O'Callaghan ahead of the game.
Hi, Conor. Just wondering, is this nice to be able to get back to an international window after the disappointment of the Championship playoff final last weekend?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's always great to meet up with the lads. I was really eager to get out here after the final, win or lose. I'd missed the March camp as well, so I haven't seen a lot of people for quite a while. Looking forward to tomorrow night and Hungary as well, and just to get back out there and, like you said, forget about the weekend as best as possible. Obviously it was very, very disappointing, but such is life, and you have to keep cracking on and keep moving in the right direction.
I know your focus is going to be on these two games coming up, but do you think about your own future this summer? Because you went out on loan, you were very clear that you wanted to play games in terms of joining Swansea. You're likely to probably have a decision about your future this summer.
Yeah, probably so. There's no getting away from that. Listen, firstly, we've got a couple of games with Ireland, and then we're going to have a little bit of downtime, bit of relaxed time, because we've had two pretty much back-to-back seasons. It's been pretty relentless now for a long period of time, and then we'll see what happens with the future after that. But first and foremost, I'll be, obviously after these two games, I'll be heading back to Villa for pre-season and see where we go from there, really.
And just a final one for me, Conor, in terms of getting an extended period together as a squad, how helpful is this to actually have a lengthy training camp? Because it was such a rush to go into those competitive games.
Yeah, I think it's always important to get on the training pitch, get gelled. Like I said, there's new faces coming in, and there's a few older heads, and there's a bit of a mix. So, no matter who comes in, we need to gel as quickly as possible. It's been nice to have a little bit of a camp, like you say, where you can get on the training pitch and get some work done. So hopefully that will, stand us in good stead heading into these two games now.
Yeah, I think we're going to play better football with him in the team. That's a fairly obvious thing.
Yeah, he's been so important. Like, as we were saying yesterday, you obviously would love to see Cullen, Knight, Malumbi in a midfield three in a sort of strange alternate universe where you just take that track towards the future. But in the here and now, two of those three are going to be aided so much by playing alongside Conor Harahan in this team. And Ireland are in just a much better position when Conor Harahan is in that midfield as well. So, this is... I can't even believe that we're about to get into this realm of saying that this is a must-win game tonight, but there is a sense of comfort about seeing Conor Harahan back doing media, which would suggest that he's going to be back in the starting team ahead of this game, because I just think that we need those sort of players on the pitch. Just to those early nerves, if Andorra get an early chance, just be like, relax, it's okay, let's go. And we were like, all those players, while we've spoken so much about the clubs not being amazing that they play for, all those club teams should beat Andorra, would be of a higher quality than Andorra. So like, all these players are of a higher quality as well, and surely that shines through at some point.
Well, and they just need the confidence to go and live up to their own ability, and then hopefully the system that we play will allow them to do even better than their own ability and be stronger than the sum of their parts. And we just haven't seen that yet. One of the potential upsides for the disaster that we've had over the last essentially 2 years is that a load of new players have come through, and there's now something akin to strength and depth. When it comes to those midfield options, there are genuine options. There are options at goalkeeper. There are going to be options at centre-back after these next two games as well, in a way that there wouldn't have been certainly under previous managers. We knew the Trapattoni team, when everybody was fit, that was the team, and if somebody got into the team because of injury, they never got out of the team. But if everybody could just have a little bit of a run of playing football, and staying fit over the next 18 months, then I think it would be fair to say this is an assessment of where we are with Stephen Kenny's Ireland. Until then, really, like, this has just been held together with sticky tape and Pritt stick. And that's a very difficult situation for any manager or any management team. And it sounds like you're making excuses, but the reality of the situation is that so many of his players, so many of his best players have been unavailable to him. And when one of them has been fit, the other one who they would play with or who they play behind or who they need to build a partnership with has not been available for COVID or whatever. So it has been very tricky. The corollary, as I said, is loads of players are getting game time now, and we'll know a good bit more about them.
I do, I agree with you for 100%. However, I'm just always conscious of having these conversations right before an international break. It feels that we've had similar-ish type chats at the very start of each international break under Stephen Kenny, and it feels that at the end of every international break we're in a really negative place, having the exact same conversation that we had at the end of the previous international break.
Yeah, I mean, if Seamus Coleman is fit for the game against Hungary, I think whatever team takes the field, then there's enough strength here for us to go, fair enough, like that's what it's going to be like. You know, let's assume there's no outbreak of COVID. Let's assume 5-6 players don't get injured tonight against Andorra. That this squad is actually strong enough for us to see how we would do against Hungary in a meaningful game.
Yeah, and like as I say, if they win tonight and actually get a job done against Hungary next week, they're only friendlies, but they're more than just friendlies at that point, because all of a sudden it's like, we can beat a team who are hoping to get out of the group of death at the Euros.
Yeah. So look, that game, as I said, 5 o'clock kickoff. You'll have reaction and analysis from Nathan and the lads and Off the Ball on News Talk this evening. Good one here from Eoin McDermott. Under 21's brilliant performance and result against a strong Australian team, mostly under 23 for their Olympic team. Some very good players coming through who need to make the breakthrough with their clubs ASAP. Yeah, we won 2-1 with a last-minute goal. The first goal was actually an own goal, so we're still looking for somebody to be banging in a load of goals at any level in Irish football. Yeah,
like the technical qualities, I think that shines straight away. I didn't see that yesterday, but I watched the Switzerland game on Sunday, and there was kind of like a bit of a defensive mishap. Just a complete mess up, really, for the concession of the first goal, which you can forgive at that level. What you're looking for are these players of a technical level where you think to yourself, once they have the mental help that comes from playing at senior football over the next little while, and are given everything they need above the shoulders to make that jump up, do they have the skills to back that up? And I think that what we're seeing is that they absolutely do, and it's a very exciting generation at this point. It's not just a team, it's not just Stephen Kenny's team that have excited us over the last couple of years. This is like a proper, I don't want to say conveyor belts, but it's teams. It's plural at this point. We're starting to see teams of players who are of a high enough quality who look like proper prospects for the Republic of Ireland.
You know, Godwin's law is the internet rule that within 15 seconds everything on the internet gets compared to Hitler. There's like an Irish version of that when you're talking about football that we should rename the Grealish or Rice law, because every single conversation we ever have about this comes out. So here we go. I don't know why we'd hamstring ourselves not using the granny rule. In this era where the world is a small place, all countries are using it. We will lose out soon with immigration that has happened, says Shifty Lad on YouTube. Bamford's not interested. It's starting to look a bit pathetic and desperate now, says LFC_Irish Red on YouTube, who's like missing the point that literally the Ireland management team have said, no, it's over. You know, I'm just doing you the courtesy of answering this question. It's not an episode that we are going to revisit. It's not an issue. So it's not pathetic and it's not desperate, because nobody is actually trying to make it happen. It's just a topic of conversation this morning. And here we go. The granny rule is fine, but you want players who actually want to play for us. Grealish and Rice should be playing for Ireland. Another man of the match performance from Grealish. What is the Irish football equivalent of the Godwin's law? Is it the Grealish law? The Rice-ish law? I don't know.
Yeah, that's it, the Rice-ish law.
Neil McInerney back in touch. I get the history, Ger, but there will be people and families out there that feel Irish too, that live abroad. That's different. Kilban and the ilk. Yeah, there's definitely that group of people. But I think we should open our minds to the possibility that actually we can get some payback for the chronic mismanagement of the country and the economic situation. And look, there's definitely been smarter people than me are making very strong predictions that as soon as the world opens up again, there's going to be another generation of Irish people in their early 20s who are getting the hell out of here because they need to.
Yeah, like I mean, you talk about the chronic mismanagement of the country in a historical sense. What is the current mismanagement of the country on so many levels? The cost of living, for example, that is going to force another generation out of this country, not just on a sort of I'm going to go travelling the world sort of sense, but leaving the country never to return.
For quality of life. Exactly,
which is exactly what it was in the 1980s and previous to that as well. So this is something that isn't just ancient history. This isn't something that Kevin Kilban's family had to do in the past. This is something that unfortunately is going to be a thing that we will exploit, if I want to use that phrase, in future. The granny rule will have to be exploited by Irish people in the future, because there will be people who feel Irish who aren't living in Ireland and who haven't grown up in Ireland in the future, unfortunately. As much as we like to think that this country has fixed itself and we'll never go back to those days, Ireland will tend to find a way of shooting itself in the foot.
OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is time for our second Euros cheat sheet of the day. If we can have our 90-second timer, it is going to be Sweden.
It is going to be Sweden, yes. So it is their 6th consecutive European Championships, and in 4 of the past 5 tournaments, they've been knocked out in the group stages. In their most recent tournaments, in general, they finished bottom of Ireland's group in Euro 2016. Hat-tip Wes Hoolahan. They went on to make the quarter-finals of the 2018 World Cup after topping Germany's group and beating Switzerland in the last 16. But it was England and Dele Alli who beat them in the quarter-finals. Sweden were also in Spain's qualifying group and finished 2nd ahead of Norway and Romania. The only game they lost was in Madrid, so all in all they were doing okay for themselves. But tired of copying and pasting Chuck Norris jokes and passing them off as his own, Zlatan Ibrahimovic got bored of international retirement and came out of retirement for this Euros. However, a knee injury has now ruled him out of the tournament, which means we will all have to find some meaning for our existence now that we can't have Zlatan in our lives. Whatever shall we do? There is plenty of experience still in the squad though. Seb Larsson is still going at the age of 35, as is former Blackburn and Norwich fullback Martin Olsen, who is 33. In amongst the Owl lads though, there is plenty of good young talent in this Sweden side. Alexander Isak is 21 years old, scored 17 goals for Real Sociedad in the league this season, while Dejan Kulusevski was signed for Juventus last summer for over €30 million. He has struggled this season though, but he is only 21, so still on the way up. And then of course there is Jordan Larsson, son of Henrik. He'll probably get some game time off the bench, but netted 15 league goals for Spartak Moscow over the course of the last season and comes into the tournament in good form. And finally, for the best part, let's have a look at those Sweden jerseys. The home kit is just perfect. I will not hear a bad word said about that. And then the away jersey is the greatest jersey in the history of the European Championships. I said earlier in this series that I haven't a clue what constitutes a good jersey and a bad jersey. I retract those comments immediately because I have seen the light. I have had my awakening. I would marry that jersey.
Wow. Why?
Look at it. Open your eyes.
Go on.
Look at it.
Explain it to me.
Oh, look how nice it is. The pinstripes and blue and yellow.
For the radio listeners, I want to give them an explain.
Oh yeah, let me explain it to the radio listeners. It's got pinstripes and it's blue and it's yellow. It's got a crest on one side and an Adidas crest on the other side. It's so nice. Do you not think that's like amazing?
I mean, Scotland had the exact same jersey at some point when in the 80s. Willie Miller, that's what I remember.
No yellow in that though.
There was no yellow in it. There was not. No yellow.
Just
fair enough.
Pops off the screen on a...
Okay, so you're back in Sweden. You want they're your team now.
I should be actually, yeah. I should be. I think do you know what? I think they're a half decent team to get on the bandwagon of. Don't get me wrong. It would be more fun if Zlatan Ibrahimovic was there this summer. A little bit of shade there in the 90 seconds, but I think we all wanted to see Zlatan play. Especially at the age of 39. I think they're gonna be a team that you can legitimately bandwagon. They're going to come 3rd in this group, okay. I reckon, but they will get out of it. And then, on the evidence of last night, I suspect that it'll be a last 16 against the Netherlands. Do Sweden get to quarterfinals of back-to-back tournaments? Potentially. It's a good team that they've got. In terms of their more recent form, they've got relegated from the top tier of the Nations League. France, Portugal and Croatia was their group though, so I think we can write that off when it comes to form, a group of death. In qualifying then for World Cup, they were in Spain's group again in World Cup qualifying, so European qualifiers, European group stages, World Cup qualifiers, they're playing Spain all the time. They've beaten Georgia and Kosovo already in that group, so the form is about the same as Spain's coming into this. Just a quick run through some of the other players. The goalkeeping position is going to be Robin Olsen. He's the guy who gave Jordan Pickford a bit of trouble in goals for Everton over the last little while. Was number one there for a period of time this season. At the heart of their defence, they've got Victor Lindelof. Say what you will about Victor Lindelof. He's got 40 international caps and maybe gets a better version of himself at international level. Beside him is going to be Marcus Danielson. He's still playing in China. The China League is still a thing by all accounts. He's going to be a centre-back partner. I mentioned Kulusevski, who is going to be running the midfield for them. Their top scorer in qualifying was Robin Quaison, who plays for Mainz. He scored 5 goals in qualification, but it looks like he's not going to be starting. It's going to be an old-fashioned 4-4-2. And one player who I haven't mentioned is Emil Forsberg, who's a little bit of a Jesse Lingard for me, like the oldest wunderkind in the world. He's 29 years of age at this point. Emil Forsberg, been an ever-present for Leipzig all season. So it's a good team. It will be better with Zlatan in it, but they've got a chance of causing an upset. They're going to finish third in their group, qualify as one of the best qualifiers, but I would still just give the edge to the Netherlands in that last 16 game.
The Euro 92 Sweden team is one of the most enjoyable football teams in international football history. That tournament in Euro 92 was a sensational tournament, and I can't wait until they do the Euros recaps on Saturdays with JD, and I'm really looking forward to that, because when that comes, I think that tournament will rightly be excavated as one of the great international football tournaments in history, and yet probably underrated because Denmark win it. It's like, it's funny that way, isn't it? It's like, oh, it didn't have one of the superpowers winning, so therefore not a great tournament. But actually, imagine what that would be like now.
I think that was, ridiculous. But I think that was Sweden's first ever European Championships as well. Like, obviously in the 30s and the 50s, they have these amazing World Cup runs. Obviously, they host the World Cup in 1958, so that helped them. But they had this strange thing with European Championships where it was just failure to qualify.
Right.
So they get into this 8-team tournament, as we know, with Euro 88. It was just such a hard thing to qualify for, and they go in their home tournament again in 92, in fairness, but they topped their group. They topped the group involving Denmark, France and England, and into the semi-finals. They obviously lose their semi-final in the end, but because Denmark is such a big story when it comes to Euro 92, we sometimes forget that the host Sweden were a bloody good side, and it was an 88-minute goal. It was 2 late goals. It was 2-1 to Germany, and then there was an 88-minute goal, an 89-minute goal in that semi-final that got Germany into the final, where they ultimately lose, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. That is the Euros cheat sheet. Your prediction is that they're going to beat the Dutch and get through to the quarterfinals.
No. I think Netherlands will beat them.
Okay. All right.
But I would be worried.
Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio across the rest of today. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is Jerry Eisenberg talking about Muhammad Ali. He was a bit of a confidant at times for Ali. The History of Sport lecture series with Paul Rouse at 3. Our retro panel at 4 is How We Coach Kids. At 6, it's OTB Gold, the story of Centaur, Declan Murphy, the jockey. That's his book, an award-winning book. And then OTB Tonight, Nathan talking with John Giles in the immediate aftermath of the game this evening against Andorra. Later on this hour, we're going to hear from Tom English in his book about the 1997 Lions tour to South Africa. But up next, we're talking Gaelic football with Tommy.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
The pale blue dot, it's called, from I think it was 6 billion kilometres away, and the Earth is is 1 pixel in the photograph, blue pixel. And I think to myself, everything that has ever existed on planet Earth is in that 1 pixel. So why do my little problems matter at this particular moment in time? So I used to adopt the same for sport. If something happens in a match, sure, who cares? But I gotta tell you, there's been moments where I have thrown that pale blue dot photo out the window.
Off the Ball, Saturdays from 1 on OTB Sports Radio. Listen live on the OTB Sports app.
First up, a Go Loud original from News Talk.
Get all the news you need to start your day with First Up, the podcast that brings you stories, analysis and interviews with the top newsmakers. First Up, available each weekday morning from 7 a.m. on Go Loud.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
I'd say, Tommy, I'd be surprised if he wasn't angry. And I'm surprised if Kerry weren't angry. Like, they threw away that game against last year's championship. They've had to sit for 7 or 8 months. Do you know what I mean? I remember we lost that championship game against Donegal. We didn't lose a game for 7 years after that. I tell you, we were angry after that game. When you lose a game that you're a favourite for and you feel you've underperformed and you feel you've been caught out, That is angry. And Dublin came back, I remember, in 2015, it was, we're putting this right. We were angry. So I'm not surprised to see that. The biggest change from Clifford I see, and we've seen him in the flesh market, Fitzsimons in the Dublin game, he's bulked up. There's no two ways about it. His technical ability is not in question. You could see that when he was 14, 15 years of age. This guy can kick scores from anywhere. But he's bouncing off tackles now. You know, whereas you might have been able to bottle him up, or like say Lee Keegan back in the day, or even in that game in Turles, you know, Fitzy's a strong guy, he's a fast guy, and you're getting hits on, but he's riding those tackles now, which gives him another strength to his bow where you could have tried and out-muscle him or bully him. You can see he's definitely added that to his game. And the thing with someone like Clifford, and what we're touching on here, Kerry are going to give him the ball. Even if he's being double-teamed or triple-teamed by some teams, Kerry will hand him the ball. And if Clifford has the ball in his hands, I'd say 8 times out of 10, he's at least getting a shot off. And with his accuracy, he's probably scoring 7 of them. So he is just going to be a handful for anyone. The mentality, yes, he should be angry. Kerry should be angry. If they weren't, he'd be asking serious questions. But his physicality is a big thing as well. So he was one of the first players to put down this thing. And the reason I tell you, the hat-trick he scored the first day, it set the tone for the entire National League. It was brilliant. It was like we hadn't seen a football match, an inter-county game, since the All-Ireland final in December. 5 months later, it was just a breath of fresh air. Clifford scoring his hat-trick. We're like, football is back. And the whole National League has carried on from that. Every team was playing this attacking style of play. And that was kind of like the spark that lit it. So I had Clifford in straight away, as much as, yes, there's unfortunate people to miss out.
Tommy Rooney, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are we?
Less angry than David Clifford and less angry than the Dubs were after Donegal beat them.
Yeah, Paddy Andrews was angry in 2015 and 2016 and 2017.
Are they still angry?
2018. I think they're still angry. Yeah. So it turns out the Dubs have had a siege mentality for the last 7 years, and that's really what we all need to copy at the minute. Yeah, that came from a chat about Andy was talking about Kerry maturing. That's what we've seen this year, that we can't forget how young that Kerry team are. The lads reckon that Clifford has put on a bit of size again. I think we've seen photos of Sean O'Shea, and he's put on a bit of size too. So, Owen, you'll be glad to know that we spent another chunk of time talking about Kerry once more.
This is the Kerry Hype Pod. I've listened to every episode so far, and there is a good helping of Kerry Hype being, I guess, put on a silver platter by people from Meath, Mayo and Dublin. It's almost as if there is a tactical element to all of this. I'm not hearing any Mayo or Dublin hype coming out of these same quarters.
Isn't it funny how we are beginning to underrate Dublin a little bit at the moment? Yeah. I mean, why are Dublin being underrated, given that they are 6-time All-Ireland champions and going for Magnificent Seven and still have potentially all-time great footballers? Like, Fenton is catapulting himself into the conversation with greatest footballer of all time, who's like still only approaching his peak. Why are they underrated?
I'm not sure we are underrating Dublin. Like, Paddy Andrews has 3 dubs in his team of the league, and he's got 2 Kerry lads. Although David Clifford is his player of the league.
I think I'm not sure they're underrated either, Tommy. Actually, like I just wonder, is the 6 in a row thing almost the reason why they're not spoken about as much? There's
bored talking about them. Is that what you mean?
They're not bored talking about them. They've like flatlined, not flat. Yeah, they have flatlined at this incredible level where we know what we're going to get. And I think maybe last year there was more interest in Dublin because it felt that there was maybe more of an injection of players in positions that we knew were up for grabs. Like I don't know. Maybe I don't think anybody's underrating Dublin so far this year.
At some point, a lot of those players are going to be at the end of their careers. Like, and at some point, you know, so already there's been a significant changeover. The strength and depth isn't there, as we know. They're searching for a midfield partner, certainly for Fenton, although maybe it's just Brian Howard. Maybe we're all overthinking this and it's just Brian Howard and he goes in there and plays there and like they're grand.
Possibly, yeah.
But I don't know. Like, you know, at some point, Michael Fitzsimons won't be one of the best defenders in the country and they won't be able to call on cavalry. Are there replacements, that next slew of players coming through? I guess at some point they're going to get caught, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They'll lose one and then win another 4 or 5 after that.
And I think it's more so that rather than underappreciating Dublin. I think we're all in the search for the real contenders, like who's standing up. I think that's what the most interesting thing from the league was. And whether they meant it or not, Kerry and David Clifford, as Paddy said there, set the tone at the start of the league. And I know Peter Keane was saying, sure, look, the result could have gone either way against Galway. But they set the tone for the football that was to come over the next couple of weeks. And it's been a great couple of weeks of football. I think that's it, Ger. I think we're looking for contenders. Like, we're looking for Donegal to prove themselves. We're trying to figure out whether Tyrone are going to progress under Duggan and Logan. We're trying to see. It's hard to get a read on Mayo. Like, I watched Mayo last week. It's hard to get a read on where they're at, but it feels like they're building a strong squad there, even though they lost 6-7 players last year. So yeah, like, it's hard to say too much about Dublin at the minute because there isn't that many changes. Like, Fenton's maybe playing a bit of a role higher up the field. Scully's so important. Con's playing well. But it's hard to talk much more about Dublin at the minute. We've spoken so much about them over the last 6 years.
It is interesting how there is this sort of energy in Gaelic football at the moment, that there was almost that tone-setting performance the first weekend, and it kind of feels a little bit like a tournament. Maybe we're just in Euros mode at the moment, but even with smaller groups and all that, it does feel that everything's kind of connected a little bit, even from divisions that have no relationship with one another, that there is kind of this spread of positive vibes only through Gaelic football at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the 14 groups. Like, every game pretty much mattered, and you'd hope that the semi-finals will matter too. Like, I was making the argument to Paddy and Andy, we're going to properly preview the semi-finals in Division 1, Division 2 and the relegation playoffs next week. The lads are really, really excited for it. I was trying to make the argument that, like, are Donegal not going to rest players? Are Tyrone going to really turn up against Kerry and down in Fitzgerald Stadium? Do Kerry care about playing Tyrone at this stage? But they're making the case that, like, why would you rest players in a summer like this? The games are coming so fast. There's so little time.
Jamie Wall made a very compelling argument in the hurling that if you're Limerick, you don't care about this at all. All you want to do is be championship ready come championship. And it's interesting to hear the two lads say that the speed at which the games are coming thick and fast is going to be the important point. And I can buy both of them. I think we'll only know in retrospect.
And I feel like Jamie's point may apply more so to Dublin, but Paddy's making the argument that he picked Cormac Costello in his team because there's a savage amount of pressure on Cormac Costello to deliver, that everyone can say, oh, fair enough, Cormac Costello scored 321 in that Dublin side. But the pressure's on Costello, so the pressure's on the Dubs now to stand up and deliver because, you know, they may lose their place. Now, obviously, there's a couple of untouchables in that Dublin team, but, you know, some of them have players that could easily step in and fulfil those roles as well.
Any shocks in the teams?
Yeah, well, look, I actually have to put my hands up here, and I let Paddy Andrews away with one. He was supposed to pick a Division 4 player, and all he did was give a shout out for Paddy Cunningham. He also had Donald Keoghan in there, and I think I'm not the only one who has a soft spot for Donald Keoghan on his, in there when it comes to Gaelic football. Andy was very impressed with how he set the tone for the Meath defence when he came on in the second half last week. Calls him a Division 1 calibre player playing in Division 2. I'm not sure Donald Keoghan should be in that team.
Are we talking about Meath again?
I'm not going to mention Meath anymore. I'm just saying that maybe I should have challenged that Donald Keoghan pick a bit more. Andy went for Peter Hart in the half-back line. And he went for Brendan Rodgers over Chrissy McCaig. But both teams had two Derry players. Shane McGuigan, there was no doubt about Shane McGuigan getting in there. Although I did make the argument to the lads that I felt Paddy McBurty should be in that front six somewhere. He's been exceptional. He kicked 20 points for Donegal. He's been a leader when they've been missing Michael Murphy, and he looks really sharp. And we all know that we need Paddy McBurty flying for Donegal to actually be challengers this year. Andy left off Conor Callaghan and Kieran Kilkenny. He said he found that very difficult to do because Kieran Kilkenny is his favourite player at the minute. There was a lot of lads calling for David Tuberty to get in. I think Owen Cleary makes the cut for his consistency over the 3 games. And then Kyle Coney got in touch last night asking how the hell was Stephen Campbell left off the team. But Andy, if you listen to the podcast, is making the case that he has no Armagh players in there because he reckons that they're more to do with the sum of their parts. Paddy has Rian O'Neill in there, but he's gone for an all-out attack side. He hasn't got many. He's got a couple of man markers. He's got Ronan McNamee and Owen Rigney from Offaly, but it's a pretty attacking side from Paddy Andrews there.
Is it just me, or does it seem like the divisions 3 and 4 are getting way more play this year than they have in previous years? Why is that happening?
I'll be honest, I've struggled to watch too many or many Division 4 games. I would say Division 3 though is. Division 3 has Cavan and Tipperary in there.
But at least there's conversations about what's happening in Division 4 in a way.
Yeah.
Like, is that because they have mainstream managers? I don't know.
Possibly. Do you know there's a lot of intrigue around Enda McGinley and Mickey Hart? Tony McEntee's in with Sligo. There's a lot of interest there on what's happening in those counties. So absolutely, that could be having a factor in it. Like, maybe one day we'll get to the game where, we have GA going now at the minute where we can stream all these matches. Maybe it'll be a red zone style or BT Sports style, situation on a Saturday or Sunday where we can watch all the games and we can pick and choose. Maybe the audience wouldn't be there for it, but yeah, Division 3 is definitely getting kudos. Rory Gallagher actually coached Paddy Andrews when he was 17, 18, 19. So he was telling us that Rory had a massive influence on him. So we're hoping to get stuck into Rory next week on the podcast. But another man who had a big influence on Paddy Andrews in his career is this guy. I think we have the photo. This is a never seen before image of Paddy Andrews and Roddy Collins from 2011. I'm not sure where the local boozer is, but that is the local boozer, and he's signing on for Monaghan United that summer.
Looks like a golf club. It does look like a golf club, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not fully sure where it is. It could be the local. Yeah, that's Paddy. Kind of he doesn't get fully into the Rod Squad story, but we get a little bit from him. He describes Roddy as the Irish Harry Redknapp, and we also get a bit of chatter again from Andy Moran talking about his Longford Town days. We have an image here, I think, Emma, of Andy playing for the Longford under 21s.
Oh, wow.
2003. You can see him in the corner there. Andy has a smashing story. I think he was set up by a local tailor in Longford, and he comes in for his first Longford game dressed like something like one of the Liverpool players in the 90s. And Vinnie Perth was the Longford captain at the time. Andy reckons Vinnie wouldn't remember him, but if we have Vinnie on next, I reckon we'll figure out whether Vinnie remembers a young Andy Moran turning up in a grey slacks, a black shirt, and a white tie. He's only 19 years old, so Paddy's a man for wearing the suits. Andy says he's the type of person that goes around wearing tracksuits. He's obviously running the movement gym out in Castlebar, and Paddy's turning up into wearing suits every week. So the lads are, coming from different sides.
It sounds like you're having the crack, Tommy. The Roddy Collins story is great. But
yes.
the quality of the analysis is the thing. You're actually getting deep into some of these teams and why football is evolving the way it is, and it seems like we are actually in a period of tumultuous change for the game, and to be able to have it explained is great.
Yeah, I'm finding that brilliant. Talking about the defences, the manner in which man marking is coming back to the fore, the attacking strategies, the pressing. We actually get talking about Philly McMahon and the role that he might play at Bohemians, and we talk an awful lot again about the influence that soccer and basketball has had on Gaelic football over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Paddy was making the case that GA was so insular before 2010, 2011, and that it started changing then around probably the Jim McGuinness era in 2014, 2015, when Dublin got angry and they had to find a way to outsmart the northern teams. And
well, I think it changed. I think it changed in the noughties. That's the thing. And they were just a decade behind. That's how it goes. Right. There's a cycle. There is a cycle. It didn't change for a long time, and then we had the back door, and it was more than straight knockout, and all of a sudden teams had to play multiple games. That transformed the sport in one way. But also what happened was a bunch of very smart people got jobs in colleges where they were able to think about Gaelic football all day, every day, and that coaching started to have an influence. We should trace 100%. That, because like the two lads are very well placed to trace that. It turns out they're kind of Forrest Gump-like in terms. Is that a cultural reference you clowns get?
Just about fits into my lifespan.
You know the Travelling Wilburys, Tommy?
But
yes, I do.
But everybody knows the Travelling Wilburys individually. I'd never heard of the connection to the Travelling Wilburys before. To be honest with you, it sounded like some sort of animated show featuring rabbits rather than an actual band of legitimately all-time great musicians.
Was Wilbur one of the rabbits in Watership Down?
I don't know.
Do you know what Watership Down is?
I'm familiar with it. I have no idea. I was kind of more thinking like Animals of Farthing Wood sort of type bunny rabbit sort of thing.
That's a classic. Are we getting into movies here? Are we?
We don't have Sue with us today, but just.
I'm disappointed because I finished Mayor of Easttown last week, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, guys.
Well, I'm trying to avoid your tweets just in case you might spoil something.
Oh, I wouldn't spoil it. I'll be honest.
You're kind of like trying very pointedly not to spoil it, but then do. Oh my God, what an amazing last shot! How well it was acted. Blah blah blah. I'm like, shut up, Tommy. Shut up.
Yeah. No, to be honest, you'll get it when you watch it. Like,
sure.
No, there's nothing to give away. It's nothing to give away. It's just
it sounds a bit like a spoiler to me.
It's just there's a great shot of Kate Winslet dying at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Come on.
Oh,
how wordless
I can categorically say that Kate Winslet dying has nothing to do with this because she doesn't die.
Hey, Tommy! What are you doing?
God.
It's not a spoiler.
I'm not watching that.
It's not a spoiler.
Oh my God! Right, you're gone. Pull his line there. Thanks very much for that, Jojo. Thanks, Tommy. Episode 4 of the Football Pod is available on the OTB Sports app right now. You can get it there, and you can get it everywhere else you get podcasts. And make sure you rate it on iTunes if you're an Apple user, and share it. That is really important in helping it to get to the audience that it deserves to get to. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, let's get back to episode 1 is also available on the OTB Podcast Network. This is a Go Loud original. And Owen and Sue obviously don't have enough to do with their day jobs. They've decided to go off and moonlight.
Yeah, this is it. We have to try and fit our days somehow. So episode 1 went up last week. It was Glengarry Glen Ross with Simon Delaney. If you haven't seen it yet or haven't heard it yet, you can just type in Let's Go Back To into your podcast app and get it. That's where you'll also, if you click subscribe, get today's episode, our second episode, which is Ferris Bueller's Day Off with Jarlath Regan. Now, this is actually a really interesting study from his perspective on kind of what we were talking about earlier on Ireland in the 1980s being either a place that you emigrated from or a place that you stayed in and put up with how bleak it was. And watching something like Ferris Bueller's Day Off from his perspective, being a kid in the 1980s, was like, wow, America. This is very glamorous altogether.
Yes.
Whereas my perspective would be very different on it.
Let's have a look at a clip from episode 1. This is Simon Delaney doing an Al Pacino impression.
Well, it's very hard not to do an Al Pacino impersonation when you're doing that part. You know, you tend to do the voice that he does, and he shouts it. It's very, and the hands, out to earn a living, and it's all this, and because it's an amazing character study. And I remember reading up about the movie and reading up about Ed Harris, who was talking about it years later, and he said, he said that when they were filming the movie, because it was only filmed over about 4 weeks, 35 days or something. And they all did it for less than they normally would. Pacino would normally get 6 million. He did it for 1.5. They all took reduced fees because it was only about an 8 million budget or 18 million budget. Anyway, he said even on the days that they weren't filming, when they weren't scheduled to be on set, Ed Harris said they'd all go to the set and they'd just sit there and watch, because it was like watching a Broadway play every day.
That is really interesting. I didn't know that. That's the type of good nuggets that are coming your way from Let's Go Back To, which is available. It's a Go Loud original. You get it on the Go Loud app, or you can also, at the moment, get it on the highlights section on OTB. So it sounds like you're having crack doing that on. Yeah, no, it is. It is really enjoyable. There's some good ones coming down the track as well. A couple of TV episodes as well. You can tweet us as well with any suggestions you have for this, because this is just an excuse basically for us to go and watch our favourite things again. And somebody tweeted me last week suggesting The Thick of It, which is definitely on the list at some point. The Office and The Sopranos are 2 of the TV episodes coming your way down the line. I won't say which episodes just yet, but let's just say it's 20 years since Pine Barrens came out. So maybe it'll be Pine Barrens. Or maybe not. Maybe not. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to hear tomorrow morning from Jim McGuinness, the Considine sisters, Alan Quinlan, and we'll have all the reaction to Ireland against Andorra. Right now, we're bringing you Tom English on last night's Wednesday Night Rugby, talking about his brilliant book on the 1997 Lions Tour, South Africa. Enjoy.
Now, looking forward to talking to our next guest about a new book he has written in conjunction with Peter Burns. It's This Is Your Everest, The Lions, the Springboks and the Epic Tour of 97. I'll hold it up there if you're watching. Tom English and Peter Burns. And I'm delighted to say Tom English is with us. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Joe. How's it going?
Very well. So this is a well-excavated tour, I think, and there's the documentary, and we're all pretty familiar with it, I think, in many ways. What gave you the impetus to say there's more in this?
You know what? When I was initially talking about doing the book, I was against it because I thought the DVD covered it, that there was nothing else to unearth. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought actually the DVD was a benefit to us, because through that, everyone loves this tour. I mean, they feel as a connection to the tour, even though they were never on the tour. They might never have been to South Africa, yet everyone feels a kind of love of that tour because of it. So I thought that was a strength, not a weakness. And then we thought, myself and Pete, you know, if we really make this almost 50-50 between the Lions and the Springboks, it brings something different, because their story has been told in bits and pieces, but not in terms of a book, and not playing off the Lions as we tried to do in it. So it's a kind of a look at the Lions for sure, and try dig deeper into those stories, but also very much bring the Springboks to life as well.
Yeah, I got to say, in many ways, it was the Springbok story which grabbed me every bit as much, and I hadn't been anticipating that. Can we, to give people a flavour of this, just chart South African rugby from 1995 up to this Lions tour, this 2-year period that we don't hear that much about, I think, when we're talking about the Lions in 97. Everybody obviously very familiar with 95 and Mandela and winning the World Cup. And then probably, you know, the next time we think about them in serious terms, in our memory anyway, it's the 97 Lions tour. You think, well, not much would have went on in those 2 years. Holy moly, that's the wrong thing to think.
Yeah, an awful lot went on. I mean, everything changed. 1995 World Cup, Mandela and Pienaar, the game that changed the nation and all that. It didn't. It might have changed the nation for a day. Pretty much immediately after it, South Africa sunk back into this a racist morass, and not just racism, all sorts of other issues. Pienaar had a spectacular falling out with the South African Rugby Union and was virtually retired. Kitch Christie, the coach of 1995 World Cup winning team, a beloved character, father figure for many of them, became unwell, seriously unwell, died a few years later. He had to give up the coaching job and he was replaced by André Markgraf, a hugely controversial figure. Markgraf lost his job after one of his players at Griqualand West, one of his club players in a previous job, secretly recorded him making racist comments. And at that time, we're now into 96. There was so many racism stories in South African rugby. The story, we start the book with the story of Daniel Bongane, a farm labourer in Western Transvaal, who a few years earlier had been accused by a fellow labourer on the farm of stealing the equivalent of, I think it was £14. And the owners of the farm, Henry Trump and his father, exacted retribution by beating him to death with the fan belt of a car. Now, Henry Trump was a very promising rugby player. And post-World Cup into 96, there was a furore about Trump because a lot of people wanted him to play for the Springboks. Now, he served 4 months for his part in the death of the murder of Daniel Bongane. But he did play for the Springboks, remarkably. And in fact, he played against the Lions in a provincial game in 97. And looking back over it, there wasn't, by 96, 97, the furore had dissipated. So it was kind of accepted. You know, he'd done his time. Leave the guy alone. He's a very promising rugby player. He'd done 4 months. So that was another one. And there was so many, with Markgraf, with the kind of exit of Pienaar, with Bongane's death, Kitch Christie leaving the stage. There was financial pressures on the SARFU as well. A lot of players were unhappy. Coach Carl Duplessis came in to coach the Springboks against the Lions. Players weren't having him. Now, they still had that kind of Afrikaner supremacy. They didn't think the coach was any good whatsoever. Including Teichmann, all the big players didn't think Duplessis was up to the mark. A great player, but not a great coach. Yet they still utterly convinced that they were going to beat the Lions. They didn't think a whole lot of the Lions. So the backdrop was huge unrest in South African rugby, yet supreme confidence that they were still going to win.
Yeah, the racial unrest seems to have clicked very quickly back into gear, not surprisingly, very quickly after the 95 final. As you mentioned, Pienaar is dumped out of the squad, and there is division at all levels. Like, so, yes, there's Mandela, but for instance, your book talks about a Trevor Manuel, the Minister for Finance, who, in the tour where Henry Trump makes his debut, New Zealander tour in South Africa, he is very much the Minister for Finance supporting New Zealand. This notion that the Springboks is a team for all people is not cutting any ice with him, not least when Chester Williams is injured and there's no black player in the team. And I was interested to read as well that, again, post-95 and this moment of, I don't know, some kind of healing, superficial and all as it might have been on the pitch with Mandela and Pienaar, that during this 2-year period, home fans once again started waving the old flag of the apartheid era. And I think More du Plessis stepped down from the manager's role. He was unhappy about this, and he was kind of hung out to dry by the South African Union on this issue. So that was bubbling away as well. This was far from, as you said, some kind of united camp on the racial front, which is no surprise to anyone, but it's very striking how quickly it reverted to that atmosphere after 95.
And that's the thing, Joe, how quickly, almost immediately, because you had people at the heart of, well, certainly at the top of South African Rugby Union, who didn't really want black players, who didn't see the worth of them, too much trouble, too much hassle, not good enough, prejudice coming out their ears. And Louis Lloyd, the high priest of the game in South Africa for many, many years, led that charge, and they kind of paid lip service to it. And there were some people on the South African Rugby Union who wanted black players to get a fair shake, but the big boss didn't really want that, and the numbers were appalling. And we talk about, you know, the game that united a nation in '95. It clearly wasn't. The World Cup win in 2019 was the one. I think if anything was going to unite the nation, because there were so many players from diverse backgrounds in South Africa in that squad, in that starting team under Rassie Erasmus. But 1995, I think it has taken on a mythology that it does not deserve. You know, books, films about it. It just does not deserve that title, as romantic as it is.
Yeah. So, again, to reiterate, because we've thrown a lot of the listeners there, there's Henry Trump, who serves 4 months in jail for the murder of the 16-year-old Daniel Bagane. There's the loss of the coach, Kitch Christie, who sadly passed away in 98 of leukemia. The team had won every game, effectively, under his leadership. So that's a massive loss. There's, you know, the likes of Trevor Manuel, Minister for Finance, against the team. There's the home fans waving the old flag of the apartheid era. There are pay disputes in that the 95 World Cup winners are on great money, and increasing numbers of new players are most certainly not on great money. And that's obviously not a great issue for team morale. And then Andre Markgraf, as you said, the new coach, he resigns in disgrace, the racial slurs caught on camera. Just to add one other one in there, the lock, Johan Ackerman, in May 97, he's caught rotten for anabolic steroids, and he's banned for 2 years. So South African rugby is in free fall, which brings us to Karel du Plessis, the coach that would lead them against the Lions. He got the job 37 years old, Tom, so their 5th coach in 4 years, 37 years of age, had been by all accounts a stunningly good winger as a player, only 12 caps because his era coincided with South African isolation from the sporting sphere. So he didn't probably have the playing career he might have had otherwise. And I presume it's well sourced. Your book contends one of the reasons he got this job, and it was a surprise, is that he was seen as a bit of a poster boy, clean cut. There's not going to be any issues with him. You know, they just had lost the last coach in disgrace, that he was kind of a safe pair of hands type thing, although it seems totally unqualified here for this job.
Yeah, a safe pair of hands after the Markgraf fiasco. I mean, Markgraf, I would say, when I say he was secretly recorded with these racist comments, secretly recorded by the Bester brothers, Andre and his brother, former players. Andre, who went on to coach Ballymena bizarrely, threatened to sue me when I was writing for the Sunday Times for bringing this up many years ago. But anyway, so we had that episode, and Du Plessis was a very intelligent man, good on detail, a bit of a visionary, but the box and the establishment Bok players said there was one way to win a game, and that was to beat the hell out of everybody else. Physical domination. Du Plessis wanted to broaden the game out. He wanted to be more expansive. And I don't think his players were ready for it. Some of them said they actually fell asleep during his team talks because they just went on and on and on. They wanted, after Markgraf, they wanted Nick Mallett, who was one of Markgraf's assistants. It was Markgraf and it was Du Plessis. They saw Nick Mallett as a guy who was more in tune with them, whereas Du Plessis kind of operated on a kind of higher plane intellectually and rugby-wise. He wanted them to do things that they just did not want to do, and he took an awful long time in telling them.
Yeah. Can I jump ahead here to page 268 of the book? And this is after the first test, as your book tells it. Like, to say the players aren't having him is such an understatement. So, for instance, Andre Sneeman says here, we doubted, we were asking questions. The questions were never answered. Why did he select me on the wing? I'm a specialised centre. I've been a centre my whole life. Why does he pick me on the wing if we've wingers already? Why do you take my best position away from me and put Percy Montgomery at 13 if he's actually a fullback? It was really confusing. So we'd be like, hang on a second, does this coach know what he's doing? And then Gary Teichmann, and a few of them said this, by the way, you can't fault Carl Du Plessis as a person. But he said there was no plan. Everything was wishy-washy. And that was not a strong Lions team. We should have beaten them. We were at 6s and 7s on and off the field. And that was down to a lack of experience. And then finally, James Dalton. And this one's so damning because he's so nice about Carl Du Plessis.
Yes, he is.
He says, Carl Du Plessis is an amazing man and the best wing to ever play for the Springboks. He was a remarkable rugby player, but he had no clue about coaching an international team. As a person, he was softly spoken, very gentle in his communication. You couldn't help but like him. I had so much respect for Du Plessis, the rugby player. But as a coach, he was a joke. He said he found it difficult to articulate the most basic aspects of the game. Gert Small was similar. He made such an impact as a player, but as a coach, I found him one-dimensional, and he had an archaic and outdated approach to training. And finally, Tom, James Dalton echoes what Teichmann says. He says, we should have annihilated that Lions tour side, and we didn't because of bad team selection. So that's how they feel. You really get a sense, like, we just left that one behind us because we were absolutely abysmally coached and we should have hammered that Lions team. That's their sense of this thing.
That's the vast majority of them feel that way to this day. And I think that a lot of them are being very disrespectful to what the Lions brought to the party, because I thought it was a great Lions team and a great Lions squad and a remarkably united Lions squad. But if you look at the way the first two tests went, you can kind of see their point, particularly the second test, which, in the researching of this book, I've watched that second test a number of times, and I still don't know how the Lions won it. But I do, because the Springboks missed 6 kicks out of 6 at goal. They had 3 different kickers. They all missed. They all missed 2 each. And that's the game. The Lions win with Jeremy Guscott's drop goal. So they are amazing. I mean, Os Durant was one of the few who kind of gave the Lions due credit. But kind of Os Durant went on and won a World Cup. So maybe the blow was softened for him, where it wasn't for the Teichmanns and all the other guys who didn't stay in the team long enough to win a World Cup.
If we go on to the Lions then, I mean, loads of characters emerge in the book, lots of interesting stories. I mean, I'd known, you talk to so many of the big names, like I'd known Delalio was very motivated by the death of his sister when she was 19 and he was a few years younger, but that really, he speaks very powerfully about that he was playing for a higher purpose. And you've like Jenkins, who's retching every game. I didn't realise he was still retching every game, even as a coach. That was kind of new on me, which is just kind of hilarious. Isn't it? Oh, it's incredible. And I didn't know the story of Peter Clossy and the injury. And man, I suppose he was bereft, I suppose, is the only way you could put it. And he seems to just a rare moment of vulnerability, I think, is how Keith Wood describes it. Like, he can't bring himself, so his back is gone, and he has to pull out of the tour before they even depart. His back is gone. He can't bring himself to hand back the Lions gear. Can't do it.
Yeah, and he won't give back the Lions gear to one of the Lions Alakadus, and the Lions Alakadu, Bob Whale, goes to, and I think a former kind of army guy, British army guy, goes to Keith Wood's room and says, "Mr. Wood, we have a problem with Mr. Clausey. He won't give his kit back." So Woody goes along. Woody goes along. He's very funny, as you can imagine. Woody's very funny in telling the story. He goes along to the Claw's room, and he sees this the Claw like he's never seen the Claw before. He knows the Claw most of his life. And the Claw is genuinely distraught. And Woody has never seen this before. I mean, genuinely upset. And he's going, the Claw's going, what, you know, the gear, my initials are all over it. My initials are all over. What do I do? What do I do, Woody? And Woody says, tell them to stick it. So Bob Whale, I think, was sent off with a giant-sized Limerick flea in his ear, and the Claw came back to Limerick with all his kit, and he gave it away to all the young players at Young Munster.
Yeah.
So that kit is out there somewhere with PC written all over it.
Yeah, mad story. I'd never heard that. And geez, talk about a sliding doors moment for both of them. You almost wonder, is this stuff made up, because it's like too cinematic and perfect. As Claw is coming down the escalator at the airport to head for home, Paul Wallace is coming up the escalator to join the tour, a tour that changes Paul Wallace's life. And they obviously can't stop and talk to each other, and there's a look and there's a, you know, nod of sympathy from Paul Wallace, and there they go, and that's sliding doors. And I guess that brings us to the first test. I'll come back to Telfer in a moment, Tom, but just, you know, I mentioned Delalio and Jenkins and someone like Claw. We can't mention all the players. Paul Wallace on that tour, what jumped out to me, I knew he'd had a great tour, right? But the players talk about his performance in that first test in particular in almost like hushed, reverential terms. Like Dawson's try, Martin Johnson says, I just turned straight away to Paul Wallace and said, that is your try. It seems, and I'm no scrum expert, but it seems what Wallace did in that scrum is absolutely iconic.
Yeah. And, I mean, bear in mind, in the first scrum, and they're going up against this humongous wrecking ball machine of a front row. In fact, the entire pack, but particularly the front row of Oz Durant, Adrian Garvey, and Nakadrotsky. And these guys were, like, properly huge. And everyone knew they were properly huge. And the Lions were very, very worried about it. Because these guys were coming after them. And in the first scrum, they absolutely demolished the Lions. And the whole of Newlands went ballistic because this is what they wanted. You know, the Lions were gadding about their country for 4, 5, 6 weeks at this stage. They were beating teams up left, right, and centre, playing fantastic, expansive rugby. And every time they went to a new place, the South Africans were hoping, right, you know, when they get to Cape Town, they'll get sorted out. When they get to Bloemfontein, they'll get sorted out. And then we're never sorted out. And then we go to the big arena, and the first scrum, bang, the Springboks destroyed them. And that's, everyone was going, even Oz Durant was going, right, we thought after the first scrum, we thought we had them. Because no more now can they play this expansive rugby, because we are going to physically crush them. Second scrum wasn't great either. But they didn't get shunted back as far. But what Wallace did after that, he figured it out. He figured it out and adjusted his body position, almost certainly cheating, but who cares, because he wasn't caught. And he got himself into an angle, body position, that the Springboks really couldn't handle. And the more and more the game went on, the angrier, and a lot of players said this, the angrier the Springbok front row in particular became, because this wasn't following the narrative. How are these little guys Tom Smith, Keith Wood, Paul Wallace, particularly Tom Smith and Paul Wallace, small men giving away stones against their opposite number. How the hell were they surviving in the scrum? Why weren't they off the pitch? Why were the Lions still hanging about on the scoreboard? So they got very, very frustrated. And a lot of that, Tom Smith and Paul Wallace, I mean, they're two guys who went down. Well, Wallace, as you say, wasn't even in the squad. Tom Smith, Martin Johnson, the captain, said when the squad was selected first, he said, I didn't know Tom Smith from a hole in the head. And yet he makes the test team, and he's immense. He's two small guys, one Irishman, one Scot, going up against two beasts. And they survive. They find a way to survive. And it's rugby heroism, you know, it really is. It's just clever play from the two of them, thinking in the midst of this absolute cauldron and finding a way to survive.
Yeah, it's amazing. That passage alone where the other players are talking about how they handled it is great. And I guess that ties in with the Telfer point. You have to talk about Jim Telfer on this tour, and there's a great chapter on Telfer. I mean, the build-up, there's like this neurotic fear of the South African scrum, and you said in the book at one stage, you guys say, look, yeah, this was 15 against 15, but really this was 8 versus 8. And so Telfer is tasked with preparing the forwards. And I think people are very familiar with Telfer in so many ways. He was a player, obviously, on the Lions, coach in 83 when New Zealand beat them 4-0. You kind of go into his history. I was pretty interested to read as well that growing up, his father was a shepherd and his mother, I guess, a servant in the big house. So his socialist roots took hold early on. Why do they have the big house and we don't?
Yeah, I mean, he was driven by that and still is. He's 81 years of age now. And he says he's even more of a socialist now than he ever was back then. But he's not changing for anybody. And he was, as a young man, he despised privilege. He hated the fact that some people had so much and some had so little, and still does. And that drove him right throughout his rugby career. And this was one ferociously driven rugby player, a guy who would take any manner of punishment, whether he was playing for Melrose, whether he was playing for Scotland, or whether he was playing for the Lions. And he took that ferocity into his coaching. And my God, I mean, you talk to Jim, you go to his house in Galashiels, and the first thing you'll notice is how beautifully manicured his garden is. And he wants now to talk more about his begonias and his chrysanthemums and his roses than he does about rugby. And the one trophy that he has in his house is sitting in the hall table, and it's the Galashiels Small Garden of the Year winner. And he is immensely proud of this. And when I go to his house fairly regularly to see him because I love the man to bits. Yeah. But the last time I was there, we went out to the front door and he pointed down the street to another beautiful garden. He said, see that? That's my competition this year. You know, so I says, Jim, and he says, why are you into gardens so much? He says, flowers don't talk back. I said, I bet I said, Jim, your rugby players never spoke back to you. No chance.
Well, it seems that way. So his nickname is Creamy because he was literally foaming at the mouth, and he's a tough man to say the least. Look, there is the famous speech, which I think we'll play some of and it's so cool that it was caught the way it was caught in the documentary. There's an intervention, I guess, before that where it's the honesty speech where he's talking about how the players, Lions players in the past have come out and they bitch about the food and they bitch about the hotel, and the only thing they don't bitch about is the fact the sun is shining, and they make excuses, and we have to stop making excuses. And he read them the riot act, it seems, and it was a timely intervention which worked. And they all talk about this session he did with them, 43 scrums in 40 minutes. I mean, the number of scrums varies, but 43 scrums in 40 minutes is Keith Wood's recollection, and he says it's etched in my brain, that number. So it seems like this is completely unheard of stuff. He pushed them to their limits on this tour, it seems.
Keith Wood says he pushed them beyond their limits, and they pushed it to places where they didn't have limits. They didn't know they had this within them to go to these to go to these places that he was pushing them to. And some of them just, as soon as the tour was over, in fact, as soon as the second test was over, some of them, their bodies just gave up. I think Keith Wood said he bent down to pick up his shoes and he did his back. You know, he saw them, and he saw the one way to win this was to be tougher than the box, or to break even against them, at least. And he always said that the fitter player not just lasts longer on the pitch in terms of playing, but can think clearly for longer if you're fitter. And it was funny that the Scottish guys, before the tour, they were talking to some of their, you know, Gregor Townsend was playing for Northampton. Tim Rodper was also his teammate at Northampton. And Rodper was asking Townsend for stories about Telfer, and Townsend was giving them about these hair-raising stories of what he did to the forwards. I mean, the abuse he was been giving them for years and years and years. And Rodper says, no, that won't be happening. That won't be happening to us. We're not going to be. Do you think Jono, Neil Back, do you think Jason Leonard, do you think all these guys are going to be taking that from him? And said within 2 minutes, Tim Rodper thought that Telfer was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Because they, as I remember saying to Keith, I said, what was it about him? And he kind of paused and he said, Telfer just got it. He kind of understood it. And he did, because he was a line before. And he wanted it as much as they did. I mean, it's just an endlessly fascinating man.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward.